A Chosen's Ascension. The Path to Omniscience by Swagnostic Daoist. Chapter 11, Finally Experiencing Skills. Holy shit. That was all Midas could muster at this moment. His inner view was filled with lights of memories and was incredibly vivid and beautiful. But there was more to this than its beauty. Was this one of his skills? He realized that at this moment, he had the power to search his memories for any date or time, and have the memory at that exact instance pop up to him. 12 March 2014, 13:09 Foot, thought Midas expectantly, and then suddenly, right in front of him, a memory popped up. He was in 9th grade maths class. The memory itself at that moment was paused, almost like a video waiting for permission to play back. And with a thought from him, the video played on. And here we have a simple simultaneous equation, guys. Who wants to tackle this equation here for the rest of the class? Said the balding male teacher standing at the front of the classroom. The view swerved around the room at that moment, showing all the reluctant faces of his former classmates. He could even see the pimples on one of the girls' faces as she stuck her tongue out at the teacher without him seeing it. Midas even spotted a bird flying outside the window. A laughing dove. He could see how the light perfectly reflected in beautiful colors as it hit its feathers. "Don't make me choose one of you," said the teacher scaldingly, to which someone in class almost burst out a laugh. Midas was in the moment, almost as if it was happening right then. He could perfectly recall the whole moment, everything in his vision and senses was perfectly recalled. He could see every image, hear every sound, smell every smell that was possible to be smelt at that moment. He even instinctively knew his own body's condition in detail. It was as if he was reliving that moment. Holy shit, thought Midas, unaware that he was repeating this phrase for the second time. And then he understood. Is this the divine database? It must be. Wait, that means my energy came back. Or does it? We need more information. And it did. Midas could tell because his headache was gone. He previously could not even feel his headache because he had been in an altered state of consciousness, and he could feel nothing and think nothing. Now that thoughts were coming back to him, he was thrilled by this discovery. Midas wasted no time at all and wanted to test out this skill of his, and maybe even test out all the other skills he had in his arsenal. He took some time exploring his divine database's capabilities. And to do so he had to explore some of the cringiest memories of his childhood and some of his most horrible memories from his time in the Great Library. But they made no ripples in his heart. His heart was serene, as if nothing could affect it. He merely watched and explored the abilities of this skill. After some time, he had figured some things out. He could define data in a certain way and order it as he liked. He could create relational schemas and link memories together through their meaning. He could analyze memories for their meanings. He could extract meaning from memories and use it in real life by superimposing images over other images and visions. He could create memories, delete memories, and even modify memories as he liked. It was incredible. Like having an SQL database in the mind, with zero latency and lightspeed computation ability, being run by a supercomputer. His brain had effectively become a supercomputer. No wonder he had such a high intelligence stat. Of course, he would have to check his stats with reference to other S-rank gift holders before he comes to any conclusion. Actually, incredible does not even begin to describe this insane ability. S-rank is something else for sure, thought Midas as he felt a nudge from Julio. And as expected, when Midas thought of the time, it popped up in his mind. Time. 1:22. The time popped up? He had an internal clock. The divine database is insane. Midas opened his eyes, which could barely withhold the excitement within them, only to see a worn-out Julio yawning and pointing at the fire. Then something popped up in his vision. A square window around Julio's face with the words, "Searching database for match." Holy shit. Facial recognition? I can probably control it, can I not? Of course I controlled it. At this moment, I wanted to know who he is, and then the option popped up. It seems there is a passive interface between my thoughts and the database, and as long as I have energy, It will always be active and respond to my thoughts and actions. Midas nodded and Julio walked over to the other side and lay himself down on the floor to sleep. Midas did not feel sleepy, although he realized he should since he did not have that outrageously overpowered negative physical state negation he had in his test. Midas looked around and saw that the surroundings had been wiped clean by Julio's rampage. He had knocked down what was probably 100 trees in this time. Why did he knock down so many trees? Did he really think he could turn them all into firewood? Match found for facial profile. After 2 seconds, those words flashed in his eyes. He immediately willed the idea of viewing the results to his database, and then an identification document of some sorts and some other memories popped up in front of Midas. Identity found. Name, Julio Gabriel Morales. DOB, February 19, 1998. Sex, male. Nationality, República Federativa de Brazil. I see. I saw his information before in the Great Earth Library about 4 million years ago. It seems he really is Brazilian, as expected. And what's this? A criminal report and an evidence video, thought Midas. Midas watched the video and saw someone who looked like Julio beat someone with a baseball bat until he lay on the floor defenselessly. A bloody mess. Arrest report. Crime, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. Previous crimes, theft with a deadly weapon, first-degree murder, second-degree murder. It turns out that Julio was part of some cartel gang business. He had been running errands for those guys until he recently got caught up in what police were framing as some hit job and was sent to prison for the past 3 months. If it wasn't for these trials, he would have found himself facing 20 to 30 years in prison with the evidence mounted on him. Midas was irked to no end. He would never have pegged Julio to be someone with gang affiliations. Well, Julio did have scars on his face, but he figured it may be because he was overly aggressive and militant to some extent. But boy, was Midas underestimating Julio's capabilities. Worse still, Julio was capable of some terrifying things. This guy was a chosen? Midas thought chosen were meant to be the best and the brightest of Earth. He thought he was the ugly duckling among the swans of humanity. It turned out he might be wrong. There was someone suspected of murder sleeping right next to him. Well, there was evidence of the crime and he would have gotten convicted soon enough too. He was a real murderer. Midas wanted to slap himself. He knew better than to trust someone based on first impressions. Who knows in what weird ways this guy's head was screwed on. Regardless of Julio's experiences in life, someone who was capable of assaulting others while looking deep into their eyes was not someone to be taken lightly. Right then, Midas wanted to slap himself again. He had only come across some arrest reports, and Julio's history. That was not Julio himself, that was only a reference frame according to the rest of the world. How could he pass judgment so easily? Midas calmed himself down and forced himself to think rationally. Then an idea came to him. Eye of Judgment. Index. Earth name, Julio Gabriel Morales. AC, 6100. Gift of power, B rank. The gift of power, B rank. Your body bursts with power. This gift enhances your ability to use your body to its utmost limits and your ability to exert your influence on the world. Skills, Berserker, LV1, Power Conduction, LV1, Unbreakable, LV1. Abnormal conditions and states. Nature, Chaotic Neutral. Trait, Full Body Control. Mental, Narcissistic Personality, Antisocial Personality, Depression. Physical, Type 2 Diabetes. Stats. Dexterity, Agility, Flexibility, 4.9. Strength, Speed, Power, 3.7. Constitution, Endurance, Health, 4.1. Intelligence, Memory, Reasoning, 1.2. Charisma, Charm, Persuasion, 1.1. Wisdom, Intuition, Adaptability, 1.1. Spirit, Mental State, Character, 1.8. Whoa. It's as I thought. I can see their information. But with regards to this other window. I guess I have to learn the language first, thought Midas after seeing two windows pop up in front of him. What a pity. This second window seemed to have much more information available, with floating images and visuals too. This was another indication for him to learn the language as soon as he possibly can. For all he could know, there was a trove of information on the other window that he could not access or even understand yet just because he did not understand Asgaish. This new information could be even more meaningful than the index. The green life form did say that the index was merely a representation, a fake or the real thing. Could he be seeing the real thing? He needed to learn the language as quickly as possible. Midas affirmed his thoughts within himself and then looked at the thieving suspected murderer lying half a meter away from him. Oh Julio, what am I going to do with you? Midas would have to re-evaluate Julio. Even if he might be useful in the days to come, it was better for him to hold off on making any bets yet. And according to his assessed nature, he was someone who chased his personal freedom beyond anything else. It was also apparent that he had no qualms about hurting others if they put his freedoms and liberties in jeopardy. Midas' intentions flashed and the gift description page for Julio's gift materialized itself in front of him. I am not entirely sure about the significance of ranks yet. Even if our gifts are 4 ranks away from each other, I would never underestimate him. Especially with those physical stats of his. Thought Midas pensively while willing more descriptions to pop up. Berserker, LV1. Your body swells with strength for a period of time. Strong, thought Midas. As expected of a berserker skill. 15 minutes might not sound long, but it was incredibly useful in an intense situation. Power conduction, LV1. The force of your body can be applied from anywhere you will in the most effective way possible. What? That is really strong. He could throw punches with his back even, thought Midas enviously with a chuckle. The human body can only release a maximum of 40 to 70% of its potential force at a time during fights. If he really has that much control, he could even be able to reach 100%, at least ideally. Midas was getting more and more excited. Physical ability is what he lacked most at this moment. It would be great if he could keep Julio around as his bodyguard. Unbreakable, LV1. Your body's defenses become impenetrable for a time. What? Now he is bulletproof, thought Midas while shaking his head with an exaggerated eye roll. Midas knew that he should not be jealous at this moment since he not only received a gift, but he also received an authority too. It also seemed that authorities might be rare or special. He would have to collect more data to confirm this. Both of his gifts were high-level ranked ones. Midas knew that he had struck the lottery in his own way. He could tell based on the disparity in the stat upgrades that he got compared to the stat upgrades gotten by Julio. Some of Midas' stats were in the 9s. Midas felt that this signified a 9 times more capability relative to normal humans exponentially. But still, Midas found Julio's skills incredibly useful. And that meant that Julio could be incredibly useful too. Midas took a moment to think about his next moves and then he stood up and approached the broken up wood on the sides. He grabbed some larger pieces and placed them on the flames. Immediately, smoke started rising up as the wood was inflamed. Whoosh! The flames started rising higher as they found a new source of fuel. This released some light which Midas would find useful for his next actions. He wanted to make tools. Prehistoric tools. He could make a container for water, a makeshift water bottle, and he could also make a spear set and some other basic weapons. He could even make a knife out of stone. Midas then grabbed a larger piece and started his woodworking. Doing this much would keep him busy for the rest of the night. And so he grabbed a sharp-looking stone and started carving up the block of wood. Back at the shrine, there were large bonfires and tens of people gathered around speaking and laughing to each other. It didn't seem like a few hours ago, 20-odd people had died by having their heads explode in front of everyone else. That felt like a totally different time. In an obscure place outside the view of other people, 4 people gathered together as if conducting a clandestine meeting. So? "What did you want to talk about?" said a woman to two other women who were standing nearby. One of those women, with long black hair and a blue jeans white t-shirt get-up responded. "We found a stone tablet down south. It has those same types of markings as the shrine does. We think they may be linked." "Really? Did you find something else? An announcement pop-up maybe?" "An item?" said the other person. It was a man this time. He was wearing a suave business suit which looked out of place in a forest setting like the one the Chosen found themselves in. "No. There were people who came before us, but they claimed that they didn't find anything either," responded the black-haired girl. "Really, even Maria couldn't discern anything?" asked the woman again. "Why yes. I found out that they were not lying." "But," said a small woman named Maria. "But there was one guy. His name was Midas. I couldn't read him at all. Even with my truth-seeking skill I couldn't tell if he was lying or not," said Maria with apparent fear in her voice. Really? We'll go there and check the tablet out tomorrow. As for that Midas, even if he has a way to go against your truth-seeking skill, there are still other things that can be done. We'll find out the real situation soon enough." "Okay," said the two women almost deferentially. "Okay, now go enjoy yourselves like the rest of them. Just because we're in the trials doesn't mean we can't have fun, am I right?" The two girls walked over to the rest and were welcomed jubilantly. The two figures in the shadows watched over everyone with a calm eye as they began speaking among themselves. Nobody knew what those people were talking about. Chapter 12, A Loyal Dog. The morning sun crept up slowly in the horizon as the light caused the trees to cast long, dark shadows on the Chosen in the forest. In one part of the forest, there were sounds of shaving and scraping being emitted, probably by the actions of someone hard at work. CRR. If one looked closer, they would be able to see a dread-headed, milk-coffee-colored skin man on his knees holding something that seemed like a spear at an angle while scraping it on a rough stone laying on the floor. The man had a focused look in his eyes as if nothing could disrupt him, as if this spear he was sharpening was the only thing in existence. If one looked around the man, they would see other wooden and stone tools laying around. At this moment, the man was disturbed by the movements of the other man who was laying a few meters away next to a fireplace. "Midas? What are you doing?" asked Julio, half yawning while rubbing his eyes. This was the best sleep he's had in a while. Where he had come from before coming here was a place filled with evil people and monsters, where one slip-up could have dire consequences. For him to finally have some good sleep, he felt grateful to whatever put him here, whether that be human or otherwise. "You're awake? Great. Aren't you thirsty?" asked Midas while continuing his sharpening. He would occasionally blow on the spear's tip, searching for a certain shape it was supposed to assume. Now after blowing again, he realized that the spear was finally complete. "Thirsty? Oh yes, I want some water for sure." "What are these things?" asked Julio while ogling the items suspended above the fire. They seemed like wooden cups or containers of some sort. "Those are water bottles. I made them while you were asleep." "Well, they're kind of shoddy, especially since I coated them with the tree wax, but they will do the job for now," said Midas while approaching and taking the bottles off the wooden rod suspension. He then dusted them off and grabbed what seemed like bottle caps from the side and twisted them on the tops of the bottles. "Not bad, right?" said Midas with a smile on his face while waving the bottle around. He then tossed it to the dazed Julio, who caught it with a flustered expression. Midas laughed and pointed to the floor beside Julio where there sat a spear about the length of Julio's body and a rope-like binding that was made of branches. He said, "That's yours. Tie that rope thing on the bottle's ends and then sling it onto your body so it's easy to carry. Here, I'll show you." And so he began tying his own bottle in a sling and then he slung the bottle over his shoulder so the bottle was on his back. Julio was stunned. How long was he asleep? This guy made bottles and spears? When Julio continued looking around, he found that that was not all he had made. A bow drill lay on the floor by the side, and so did what looked to be the makings of some bowls, cups and a bag woven from tree bark. What the hell? Okay, I know what your gift is now. It's the gift of crafting, am I right? Said Julio half-jokingly. Midas merely shook his head and said, Index, after which he willed the idea of showing Julio his index while turning the floating panel towards Julio, and then Julio's expression changed. He could see Midas' index. Wait, how was this possible? Weren't indexes only viewable by those they belong to? I know what you're thinking, but actually as long as you want to show other people, the index can tell. It almost reads your mind. It's really cool, right? Feel free to see for yourself, haha, said Midas while sorting out the rest of the stuff on the floor, leaving Julio in another daze. Julio shook his head and figured that Midas must have trusted him for him to show his index. But he did not feel right inside, so before looking at the details, he made up his mind on his next actions. He materialized his own panel and pushed it flying towards Midas' direction before saying, Since you trust me so much, then it is only fair that I do the same. Julio saw Midas stare at the index in front of him before turning to Julio with a bright mesmerizing smile and saying, Thank you for trusting me back, Julio. Julio nodded, with a smile on his face too. And then he looked through the information on the index pages. Index Network Statistics. Earth name, Midas Mira. AC, 8300. Gift, Gift of Knowledge, a rank. The Gift of Knowledge, a rank. The memory of the world is with you. This gift enhances the ability to communicate with the universe, receive knowledge from it, and give knowledge to it. Skills, Eye of Judgment, LV1, Information Database, LV1, Memory of the World, LV1. Conditions and States. Nature, Neutral Evil. Trait, Hyperintuitive. Mental, Narcissistic Personality, Paranoia, Anxiety. Physical. Stats. Dexterity, Agility, Flexibility, 1.6. Strength, Speed, Power, 1.4. Constitution, Endurance, Health, 1.3. Intelligence, Memory, Reasoning, 5.7. Charisma, Charm, Persuasion, 4.0. Wisdom, Intuition, Adaptability, 4.5. Spirit, Mental State, Character, 1.9. Sheesh. An A-rank gift. Said Julio with envy in his voice, to which Midas said, Pfft, your stats are much better than mine. I wish I had your constitution stat. Fuck. You're super strong, you know. No way, you also have interesting skills, Midas. It's very strong in a mental way, you know. You are very smart. Haha, thanks, said Midas while scratching his head with a shy expression on his face. Julio now knew how capable Midas was. And according to his skill descriptions, he was not one to be looked down upon. He was glad his first friend was someone so capable. He wasn't an idiot, and he knew that it meant his chances of surviving and making it through would increase as long as he was surrounded by capable people. Julio focused on the skills, and a description panel popped up on top of the main index panel showing further details. Eye of Judgment, LV1. View the information of all existences in creation. Information Database, LV1. A database holding some of your memories and knowledge, with methods that allow access and utilization of memories in high-level ways. Memory of the World, LV1. Access the memory of any existence based on some conditions. This, Memory of the World, skill, was it how you were able to see this stone tablet yesterday? Asked Julio after mulling it over. Midas' skills were cool. He was almost a super genius, no? Yeah. Although. Well, as you can see, it makes me weak, so it's not worth it. But I realized that it's actually a bit more powerful than that. I'll show you in the future. As expected of an A-rank actualization. This is a superpower right here. Pfft, a superpower is this broken skill you have here. Unbreakable? What are you, Superman? No, I am not Superman, I am the Incredible Hulk, said Julio with his nose up in the air. Midas merely laughed, and they continued their conversation like that for a while cleaning up. Midas grabbed some flaming embers and placed them inside a specialized container, with the embers being wrapped by wet grass and somewhat bad firewood. This was to ensure that the embers would not burn the container while being aerated enough to stay hot and ready to produce fire for the whole day. Midas slung that container around his shoulder and let it hang to his side. Midas had also used those tree rope-like objects to weave together a bag, in which he put some miscellaneous items like the bow drill and some of his other prototypes. Julio watched as Midas slung that over everything on his back naturally. Julio now knew, according to Midas' explanations, that with Midas' new skills, he had somehow remembered all these survival skills from his childhood days of watching survival YouTube videos and television shows. Julio found Midas' ability to store fire for later to be especially handy. "Are you ready?" asked Midas after carrying every useful thing he needed. He was now carrying a spear in his right hand, which doubled as a walking stick, and a container slung by his left side, and another rope could be seen running diagonally across his body, which was attached to the water bottle at his back, and a bag over that too. "Ready. Let's go, Midas. On an adventure." Julio laughed while striding forward proudly. He was incredibly excited. Midas laughed at his antics, and they began their trek northwards. As they got going, Julio couldn't help but reminisce at how difficult their task was right now. Survival. He knew a lot about it. His life so far had been relatively rough, but where he came from, this was nothing. His mother? A sex worker who never came home. His father? Unknown. Thus, he was forced into a life of crime at a young age, having to steal from tourists to feed himself and his younger sibling. Soon enough, he was scouted into a thieving ring managed by some low-level cartel thugs, who forced him to steal for them, all for some chump change. Like that, he suffered through his teenage years, while making sure that his younger brother would be able to go to school. If his younger brother could have a better life, then all the thieving would be worth it. As Julio grew, so did his fame among the thieves. Julio had always been nimble and agile, with him being the first out of a situation when it goes bad, keeping himself out of major trouble. He developed a skill of free running through the favelas of his town to get away from the authorities, and ended up using these skills to get into some hard-to-reach places and steal some really good merchandise. This boosted his prestige and landed him a gig with a bigger cartel boss as a scout for robbers. Like that, he lived his life for years, and soon enough, he got scouted by an even higher level official who wanted a drug runner who was good on his feet. Julio did his best, sometimes getting caught up in trouble while most times managing to run away from it. Later on, he found out that his mother had been murdered during a job by a client she was pleasing. And this client was the boss that he was currently working for. Julio was beyond furious. Even though that mother of his was unavailable, she was still his mother. Julio also received a major wake-up call. He realized that he and any people he cared about could die in this place. He could not depend on anyone else anymore. He had to get away. Seeing this resentment and unwillingness, his boss did not kill Julio, but gave him an almost impossible job while threatening him with the life of his younger brother. Julio did the job, while almost getting incarcerated in the process. The problem was that now the cops had dirt on him. Julio needed to get away. But when he returned to grab his brother and his remuneration for the job, his boss refused, laying some false charges onto Julio in the process. Julio had to use his wits and abilities to get away, but his brother was badly hurt and ended up dying in Julio's arms. Julio, consumed by rage, did not want to get away anymore. He wanted revenge. This boss had not only killed his mother, but he had also killed his brother too. He had no family left, no possessions, no friends. Nothing. That fucker had to pay. No matter what. And so he waited, and planned. He used his skills to get in good with a rival gang while amassing some resources and information about the boss's actions. The rival gang knew he wanted to damage the cartel, so they helped him as much as he wanted. He knew he wouldn't have many chances to get his revenge, so he wanted his revenge as soon as possible, and with his understandings of the goings-on of the cartel, he was sure he would figure out a way in. And then one day, His boss was alone in his hotel room, smoking a cigar. Unknowingly, this was the perfect spot for Julio. He free ran over the roofs of 10 buildings, building up momentum for a jump. And then, whoosh crash asterisk asterisk clinkalink asterisk. Julio calculated his way over the roofs and into the third-story window and crashed through it. He rolled on the floor, and before the boss could react, he already swung the knife he held in his right hand, slicing the boss' neck right open, spilling blood all over the bedside tables and the frescoed walls. Julie Jew. Arg. Arg July please kgh. Julio could still remember that moment that son of a bitch died. He begged Julio to spare him while trying his best to keep the outflowing blood from leaving his body. Julio merely watched with a cold look in his eyes. How dare he? As if Julio could spare him. Did the bastard spare his mother? Did he spare his younger brother? That bastard deserved death. Julio then threw the knife as far away as possible through the broken window and then picked up a bat and walked out into the corridor. Some guys came over and Julio beat all of them up before running away from the scene. However, he was caught later on and the footage in the corridor confirmed that it was him who beat those thugs up. However, with the lack of the murder weapon, the police could not pin the murder on him, so they had him placed in lockup pending trial. He spent the last 3 months like that until he one day awoke in a field surrounded by random strangers. Julio snapped out of his reverie and looked back only to see Midas surveying around at the forest around them. Julio had finally found a friend here. A friend who trusted and depended on him. And he would protect him. No matter what. Meanwhile, Midas was thinking about a verse from his Bible. Bible of the Self, Third Testament of Heaven, Gospel of Power, Chapter 3, Verse 12, People in power don't care whether the people beneath them are capable or not. They only care if they are useful and usable. If one owned a dog, no matter how the dog looked or behaved, as long as it knew that it had to pay its respect to its owner, then everything was still okay. No matter if the dog had the scariest face or the sharpest teeth, as long as it was still subservient to its owner, then all was fine. In the same way, so what if Julio had killed people before? So what if he had been to jail? So what if Julio was a criminal? As long as Julio was loyal to Midas, then everything else was negotiable. Actually, as far as Midas was concerned, this was a signifier of Julio's potential more than anything else. Midas had already determined that Julio was useful. Now he would make sure to make Julio usable by him and only him. Even if he had to lie and cheat to do it. Whatever it takes. Chapter 13, The Price of an Apple. Midas and Julio got to know each other better in their morning walk, with both people sharing more details about each other. Midas told Julio about his story. How he grew up in Johannesburg to a mother who never paid attention to him and how he had to take care of himself for the longest time. He told Julio about how he went to school and never really stood out with his below-average background and average marks. He told Julio of the fact that he went to university but he ended up dropping out due to mental issues. He then ended up staying home due to social anxiety issues. He then told Julio that the only thing he had ever loved was reading. And that's why when asked by the actualization test about what he wanted, he said that he wanted books. Julio ended up telling Midas about his own story. His rough childhood filled with crime and danger and how he had managed to survive all that due to his tenacity. After telling Midas about his little brother, Midas apologized profusely to Julio for making him remember something so saddening, but Julio merely brushed everything off, saying that it was in the past. He was here now and that was all that mattered. As time passed, they discovered more about each other. Likes, dislikes, dreams, goals. And they came to realize that they got along really well. Julio felt more and more like this was a friend he could genuinely get along with. Midas, it's crazy, you know. I've never met someone and gotten along with them so incredibly quickly, said Julio with a satisfied smile on his face. I know, right? It's like we've been friends forever, said Midas while shaking his head. Friends? No. We could even be brothers from now on. Haha. You know what? I've never had a brother before. If you'll have me, then I'll be glad to be your brother. Then it's settled, said Julio while pouncing on Midas and wrapping his arm around Midas and letting it hand on his shoulder. Midas laughed at his antics, but he still berated him. Get off me, you're way too heavy. What? I'm as light as a feather. Meanwhile Midas was thinking to himself how perfectly things seemed to be going. Midas made sure to not reveal too much about himself. He even occasionally used lies and deceptions to make himself out to be an intelligent but reticent introvert, and Julio believed it. An estimate of the ratio between truth and fabrications would be 70% truth to 30% fabrications. And the source of the fabrications? He had long researched into Julio's family and found out everything he needed to know about Julio's loved ones. From his unavailable and unfortunate mother, to his ill-fated little brother. He also knew that Julio's little brother, Alexandro, was Julio's Achilles heel. It meant that Midas could use him to get closer to Julio and make Julio feel like he's known him forever. This is a kind of emotional transference from one person to another caused by mirroring all aspects of personality. All Midas had to do was act and behave in a similar way as one might if one was the same as Alexandro, and Julio would end up inadvertently thinking of him as his little brother. Midas smiled to himself while thinking this far, thinking, it seems it worked a bit too well. Alexandro was a bright kid in school. He was an academic achiever and had aspirations of one day becoming a doctor. He was also reticent and liked to read books often. Midas even knew what types of books he read based on his online activity linked to his Gmail account. He also knew what music he liked and what topics he was most interested in based on internet cookie data stored online. In actuality, Midas felt like there was not much he didn't know about Alexandro now. That was just how much data existed about people online. Using all this information and data, Midas was able to deduce Alexandro's possible character and formulate a shell of a personality that would trigger Julio's emotional transference mechanism. Midas was effectively mirroring Alexandro in a subtle fashion, thus making Julio become familiar with him in the fastest time possible. No wonder Julio felt like he had known Midas forever, that is because to a certain extent, he had. Since Midas already decided to make Julio his, he would exert himself fully to make his goal a reality. After an hour of walking they started approaching the center clearing as they could make out the glaring golden lights of the shrine and some dead campfires laid out all around. It was obvious that most people were congregated around the center at this time as bodies were strewn out on the floor. Whole sections of forest had been taken apart for firewood and there were many fireplaces all around where people could have gathered. Why do those guys have sticks? Do they think this is some wilderness survival thing? Pfft, I swear, these guys probably watched one episode of Bear Grylls and then they thought they could pull this off, ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha, what losers. Midas and Julio stood out among them as they carried sticks like caveman hunters. The only telling feature about the two was the fact that they had modern clothing on, with both wearing hoodies and jeans. Midas had a blank look on his face, but Julio found the jeers a bit annoying and kept sneering at people. Midas shook his head at him and tried to convey that it wasn't worth it to tangle with these stragglers. In this forest with nothing but green all around, it could get boring. They were just searching for something to entertain them. Julio shouldn't make it easy for them. As Midas approached the shrine, the domain with the bright shining lights shone visibly in a beautiful way. Midas now understood why people slept here. This was the only place they knew. And it provided some much-needed light in the darkness. Although it wasn't dark anymore, as the sun was fully visible now in the horizon, the brightness of this place must have been mesmerizing and soothing. Midas, came a voice from the side. It was one of yesterday's girls. Midas remembered her as the easy-speaking Lena. Lena? Hey. How are you? Said Midas with a warm smile on his face. I'm good. How are you? Oh, I almost forgot. Someone wants to meet you, while having a pondering expression and approaching Midas. I'm fine, Someone wants to meet me, said Midas with a curious expression while thinking to himself. So it's come. They just could not hold back their curiosity. They are probably wondering about the stone tablet. It should be fine, thought Midas. Well, it makes sense. It was possible that he had received something as one of the first to come across the tablet. If they were calling him now, then they probably felt like they had a method to deal with any possible lies that Midas may tell. Midas smiled to himself at this thought. Things were getting interesting. Yeah. I think they're awake now. Come with me, said Galena with a turn and a spring in her step. Midas and Julio followed Lena towards the west, where Midas noticed that the trees here were a bit weird. Not weird, different. Are those apples? Thought Midas, frowning. He immediately searched through his divine database for any instance of apple trees after he got here and realized that there had not been any apple trees in that position the day before. This meant that there was someone who could grow apple trees. Midas smiled inwardly while thinking, no wonder those people seemed so relaxed. They knew that there was someone who could produce food for them. But, I don't think this food is free. As long as the trees are made with someone's effort, then they are worth something and are thus not free. I wonder what the price is. Soon enough Midas was brought in front of a beautiful lady with a Chinese face and an American accent. The lady was issuing orders to others who were following them. She was wearing a blue chongpao and her brown hair hung down to below her shoulders, making her look elegant and charming. She turned and took a moment to look up and down both Midas and Julio as if she was assessing them, and then looked towards Lena questioningly. Seeing this, Lena started explaining herself. Gwen, this is Midas who Corinne was telling you about. Midas, this is Gwen, said Lena while introducing each party to the other enthusiastically. Midas nodded his head with courtesy and respect while Gwen merely smiled and said, "Oh, so you're Midas? Corinne was telling me how she found you at the stone tablet. Do you know anything with regards to that?" Wow, no fucking around, just straight for the jugular. Assertive. Influential. Powerful. She thinks herself a hunter. She thinks I'm her prey? Heh, thought Midas mockingly in his mind as he deduced her character based on all the available information around him. This woman was assertive and had the qualities of a leader. She also possessed enough influence to order around people who were formerly strangers to her hours ago. She certainly possessed enough power with all these people following her orders around, whether personal or interpersonal, which was enough to secure her position as a leader. Midas chose to deal with this as delicately but firmly as possible. I'll tell you the same thing I told Corinne yesterday. I didn't know anything, nor did I receive anything from it. Julio and I had only arrived for about 30 minutes and had just finished exploring when your guys came along, said Midas serenely. Gwen merely smiled and nodded, saying, I see. It really is annoying, isn't it? They just throw us into this place with these skills and then expect us to survive. Any piece of information that can be found could be vital for us. I hope you excuse my eagerness. Gwen looked down apologetically, but Midas' face didn't change in the slightest as he was thinking, wow, she is one shrewd woman. And when I said your people, she did not deny that, so she must be incredibly proud and possessive too. She likes dominating others with her wits and charm. Even this apology is just a play for her. Well, if you want to play, we can play. Midas' face expertly changed to one of worry as he raised his hands in a sincere beckoning manner and said, well, I totally understand, please don't apologize for anything. To be honest, I can see that you guys are putting in a great amount of effort, based on the apple fruit tree behind you. She smiled proudly and said, well, we do what we can. And this tree was built by a friend of mine, but every time she raises one, she becomes extremely weak. So to repay her efforts, we will be selling these apples to people who want food. Oh? What would you be exchanging for? Asked Midas, curiosity painted on his face. Ascension coins, said the woman with a graceful smile while staring straight into Midas' eyes. A man and a woman unironically stared at each other speechlessly for a few seconds until the man broke the silence. Oh. You're serious, haha, pardon me, I was waiting for the punchline. Ho ho ho, laughed Gwen in a graceful manner. Whether she found that joke funny was another matter entirely. How much is an apple, may I ask? Said Midas while laughing at himself. In his head he was freaking out. Ascension coins? Midas still had no idea about their true value. Spending them now would be illogical, no matter the price. Well, considering how straining they are to create and maintain, we're selling them at 10 AC per apple. If you'd like some, I can sell them to you right now, said the woman, to which Midas waved his hands and said, "Well, no thank you. I think we're okay for now. But if there's ever a chance in future, I will most definitely patronize your establishment." Meanwhile, in his head Midas was thinking that he would absolutely never ever buy an apple from these profiteers. Let alone the fact that apples aren't even that nutritionally viable as a calorie source, they may not be worth it at all. Midas also understood something else based on the activity going on around here. Everyone was getting along, feeling happy and relaxed because they already had a safe bet for their survival. They figured that they would be able to last long enough on apples. Realistically, as long as someone had the AC to buy 180 apples, then they would be able to have an apple a day to keep the doctors away. But would that be enough? Midas highly doubted it. In a place like this with no rules and regulation, it was only a matter of time before people started recognizing AC as the main indicator of power and thus start finding ways of taking it away from those they deem weaker or less worthy in overbearing and forceful ways. These actions of using AC as the dominant currency would only accelerate this common realization among the people. It was only a matter of time. As his Bible said, Bible of the Self, First Testament of Man, Gospel of ID, Chapter 2, verse 21-20, to be human is to be selfish. The human condition is that of consumption. Humans around him would always try to find ways to eat ahead of others. To have more than others. To take from others more than they give. The difference was that he knew what was coming, and as such he could plan ahead and make sure that no matter how anyone else flails and flops around, he would be the one that comes out on top. Chapter 14, A Multidimensional Conversation. Midas cunningly thought of something and said, Actually, I noticed that the trees are growing these huge bulb-like seeds on them. I wonder if you guys know if they're edible or not." Gwen didn't react much to this as she said, "Well, no, they're just seeds apparently. It would be great if they were edible." "Do you really believe that?" thought Midas. He managed to keep his face straight while continued naturally. "Oh, are you guys saying that because you tested them? I mean, nuts are just seeds too, right?" Right then, another man approached from behind the woman and started speaking, saying, "Well, who's this? A new friend?" He stood at almost 2 meters tall and had a delicate face with sharp features. His body's muscles rippled under his formal suit and made him look like a gangster. Another American. This one is a physical monster though, thought Midas. Midas could tell that even Julio, who was standing behind him, became visibly tense at the entrance of this new guy. It was like when a wild dog recognized a lion. "This is Midas and Julio." "Midas, Julio, this is Frank," said Gwen with a curious smile. Frank reached out his right arm and said, "Well, we're already in this situation together. Everybody here is friends with one another. It's nice to meet you, Midas." Midas responded by shaking his hand firmly. Frank gave a bit of a squeeze and then released almost as if to test Midas, but Midas acted as if he didn't notice it and let go. Frank continued, while waving his arms around animatedly, "Midas and Julio, right? Listen, we were thinking about forming a community of friends who help each other. Comrades who stick together. We know that people received some really strong skills and we were trying to come together and use those skills to build a haven. A home. So what do you say? You want to join us?" Midas noticed how Frank blatantly avoided the previous conversation direction, but he kept a natural face. As long as the seed that the seeds may be edible was planted, that was enough for him. Someone would later test the situation out for him, and for that, Midas would always be grateful. Who doesn't love free labor? It was clear that this Frank guy liked it too, or else he wouldn't be building a group of friends for himself. Ironic. That was the exact reason why they were setting up their little group here. Midas smiled mockingly inwardly but kept a cool face, thinking, help each other? More like help yourselves. You know what actually? Thank you. This idea of yours, I will appropriate it. A group would be incredibly useful in this place. Especially one that is under my control. Midas also understood that, funnily enough, another reason he avoided the conversation direction may be because those seeds may cause their little business to crumble. And that was something they were not looking forward to letting happen. I think that's a really great idea. But, quite frankly, I'm a bit of an introvert. We both are, Julio and I. Being in large groups like this irks us to no end. That's actually the reason why we left yesterday and coincidentally stumbled into the stone block. But I think if you give us some time to think about it, maybe we could mull over it and give you a positive answer soon. What do you think, Julio? Said Midas while turning around. Julio merely nodded and said, I agree, for now we'll just explore, maybe later on we'll see. Before he could continue his musings, Midas felt a weird atmosphere suddenly. Dangerous, thought Midas. Midas felt the atmosphere change implicitly and stepped back as quickly as he could. He also went into a battle stance with his spear ready to defend or attack on command for a split second. Then, realizing he made a blunder, he faked a dizzy spell and dropped his spear, causing Julio to respond by helping him up. Everyone else was a bit worried, wondering what really happened. Only Frank's eyes flashed imperceptibly. Are you okay? Asked Gwen with worry painted on her face. Sorry for worrying you, I didn't sleep much and it's been probably 40 hours since I drank some water, so I guess I was feeling dizzy. I heard there's a river up north. Is it true? Queried Midas as a response to Gwen. Yeah. Just go straight ahead in this direction and you'll find it, said Gwen, pointing them in the northern direction. Thank you. Midas looked in the direction and turned back to her before saying, well, we'll get going. I hope you guys won't be strangers after this. Well, we're going to set up a base here close to the shrine, so it'll be easy to find us, said Gwen. And if you find anything out, please share it with us as soon as possible. This is to help everyone know if anything changes at any time, said Frank with a genial smile on his face. Of course. Most definitely, said Midas while turning. And then he seemed to spot something and he smiled. Lena noticed this and asked, what is it? Midas pointed at a girl who was standing not too far away watching him and Julio, and he said that girl has really pretty eyes. I wonder what she sees through them. When he smiled and looked back at the two, he could see something flash in their eyes at that moment. He knew he had caught on. And he also knew that they had caught on too. At least he hoped so. Well, by then, said Midas. He turned around and waved while leaving, dragging away Julio, who was shyly speaking to Maria, in the process. Midas had no idea how Julio had found the little girl Maria in this place. He probably smelled her scent considering the dog of a man he is, thought Midas jokingly after reminiscing the less than flattering comments Julio had made yesterday. Gwen and Frank stood there watching him leave, and after some time Gwen spoke first. You did something? That's why he acted strange. You scared him off. I didn't scare him off, I just released some bloodlust and tensed my muscles a bit. He somehow sensed it and he reacted to it incredibly quickly, said Frank while shaking his head. Really? So do you think he's a fighter? Asked Gwen. No. I tested him previously during our handshake, and he didn't even react. He probably just has good instincts, said Frank, to which Gwen snidely responded by saying. So you're saying those instincts are what led him to not want to associate with us? Funny, said Gwen with a smirk. No, those are the instincts that led him towards the stone tablet. There must be something special with the place. We should definitely focus more on it, said Frank while scratching his chin. Pfft, whatever, said Gwen. I just think you're pissed because your little charm ended up not working on someone else other than me. Don't think I didn't see you giving him those mesmerizing eyes of yours. I'm surprised it didn't work, said Frank with a laugh. Maybe he's gay? Or blind? Whatever he is, we'll find out soon enough, won't we, said Gwen while signaling for someone to approach. The person who approached was the girl whom Midas had noticed and complimented previously. The girl didn't speak much, and merely flashed her hands, allowing 2 windows to pop up in front of the 2 people. Soon enough they were joined by 3 others, and all 6 people stood there. They stared at those panels and after some time started nodding to themselves. That Julio is not bad as AB ranker. The gift of power, huh? A fighter, although I'm worried about the antisocial personality disorder. Doesn't that mean he's a sociopath? Not necessarily, it just means that he won't be held back by his emotions like normal people. He can be used. Oh my God, speaking of using people again. Who do you think you are? I'm someone with an S-rank gift, that's who I am. As far as I'm concerned, a true chosen should be someone exceptional and gifted. Speaking of exceptional and gifted, that Midas is really special. The gift of knowledge? Too bad he's not an S-rank. As if you'd want another S-ranker in our group. Pfft, do you idiots really think we're the only S-rankers here? There must be way more people hidden among us. We only came together because of my here. We could still use him, that Midas who's an A-ranker. The memory of the world skills description is almost like a psychic superpower, no? It's like seeing into the nature of things. That guy may have even used eye of judgment on us, and it possibly showed him that we have S-rank gifts. It's an A-rank skill, it might be better that Mize. It doesn't matter, he's not physically strong and therefore he's not a threat. We should definitely be friends with him though. He'd be great for the language. You mean Uzgiish? Maybe. We'll just have to keep an eye on him. It would have been great if he could join, but someone ended scaring him away. Oh my God. I didn't scare him away, okay? I merely tested him. And anyways, we're the only ones who have access to food in this place. If he wants to survive, he needs to interact with us. We'll have him soon enough. Okay. In the meantime, we'll have to ask Mai to keep gathering talented people for us. We need to find a way to get through this bullshit. Yeah. Meanwhile, Midas and Julio were walking in the forest. Julio couldn't stand the silence anymore and ended up speaking his mind. Maria is so cute, Midas, we should have stayed to chat. What? Oh my God, Julio, didn't you notice the strange atmosphere back there? The only strange atmosphere I found was between you and that girl, hee. So you found someone that you liked, eh? Listen to me from now on, I know how to get all the girls to love you. Hey Midas? Are you listening? Midas merely shook his head. He couldn't with this guy. He was thinking about the war he just fought. That whole conversation was a battlefield. On the forefront, it seemed normal. But that is only if he hadn't noticed the existence of 7 South rankers at that place, with Gwen and Frank being 2 of them. And apparently, this S-ranker club were already coming together and planning things out. They may even be hatching plans to dictate the direction of the Chosen and the trials in general. They already fancied themselves to be the leaders of all the people gathered here. The idea ruffled Midas' feathers to no end. The idea of being blatantly tested and having skills being used on him without his consent also annoyed him. If he was normal, he could have been mind-controlled, or even mind-broken by those 2 S-rankers. To them it was just standard testing. But to him, it was the ultimate disrespect and a threat to his future well-being. How dare they? How dare they test out their skills on him? How dare they try to intimidate and manipulate him into making decisions that could end up detrimental to his future? This was why when Julio started speaking about women, Midas felt a bit taken aback. Midas was merely demonstrating to the S-rankers that he had a good head on his shoulders and understood some things. He was not counting on Julio misunderstanding his jab at the S-rankers' schemes as an attempt to flirt. He had bigger fish to fry than some girl with a flimsy little B rank appraisal skill that couldn't even see through his hidden divinity. And how did Midas know that the girl had an appraisal skill? Midas had been covertly using his eye of judgment on every important object and important-looking person he passed by since a while ago. And he learned some interesting things in the process. For one thing, this trial was absolutely not safe. Chapter 15, Learning about the situation. It all started in the early morning of that day in the south side of the forest, at the stone tablet clearing. Midas had been testing out his skills and how to use them, starting with Eye of Judgment and Divine Database. After coming to some understanding about how to fully utilize those skills, he then started testing out the rest out. Midas stared at the description and felt that almost all the skill descriptions were blatantly vague. Was there a reason for this? Memory of the world, LV1. Access the memory of any existence based on some conditions. Access the memory of an existence? What does that even mean? What is an existence? What is memory? Pondered Midas while scraping on a wood block to form some cylindrical shape. Midas realized earlier that with his divine database always active, he could literally multitask now, as if his brain was capable of parallel computation. No, it was not as if his brain was capable of parallel computation. That was exactly what was happening. Multitasking might seem like a simple thing that anyone could do, but humans by definition cannot multitask. This is because thoughts in the brain are like a uniform stream that come out one at a time. One could think of it like a line of ants just walking across a surface with one ant following another and the human mind being able to only pay attention to one ant that passes by at a time. This means that what humans are actually doing when they tell themselves that they are multitasking is time sharing. They focus thoughts in one direction, then they change and focus on thoughts in another. Using the earlier analogy, it would be like a line of ants, except there would be a stream of blue-colored ants for some time, then there would be a stream of red-colored ants. It's essentially still one line. Because of the lack of focus, there can never be mastery in a multitasking state. That is true at least for normal humans. But for Midas, his divine database could instantiate new streams based on his current thoughts, actions, feelings, and commands. Even at this moment, Midas could feel that he had access to almost 200 thought streams occurring simultaneously, intermingling, and creating new streams all the time. This ability of his to think like this is effectively a superhuman thinking capability. Even his actions and reactions have been refined to their most efficient forms, only limited by the quality of his physical body and its ability to send information about what is happening inside it to other parts of itself. When Midas thought this far, he was incredibly impressed. His stats for intelligence and wisdom may be much higher than normal because of this. Seeing that both his skills and the gift of knowledge were so powerful, Midas started looking forward to memory of the world even more. Midas calmed himself and grabbed onto one of the seeds that he had picked up and used Eye of Judgment on it, thinking that he would then later use memory of the world. Seed of the Tree of Self. A seed from the Tree of Self, located in the first trial. Round bulb-like object of 5 cm diameter. Was previously ripening into the fruit of the Tree of Self. Current progress, 0.1%. Unknown consequences if ingested. What? Thought Midas in shock. The trees are called the Trees of Self? Well, it stuck to the theme of the first trial all right. And it turned out that they were ripening into fruits. Were these fruits edible? If so, there might just be a way to survive this trial. Midas needed more information on these seeds. He decided to forego the skill test and use Eye of Judgment on the rooted and living trees themselves and the living seeds on them. Tree of Self. Tree of Self, located in the first trial. 4-meter-tall tree with bulbous seeds hanging from the ends. Emits a strange fragrance that affects incarnations through its bark and branches. Absorbs emotions from incarnations through its leaves and turns the emotional energy into nourishment for the creation of fruit. Current number of seeds, 128. Current number of fruit, 0. Seed of the Tree of Self. A seed from the Tree of Self, located in the first trial. Round bulb-like object of 10 cm diameter. Is currently ripening into the fruit of the Tree of Self. Current progress, 1%. Unknown consequences if ingested. Whoa. So cool, thought Midas as he ran through the possible meanings of this information. These trees that permeate this whole space of a diameter thought to be about 20 kilometers, each and every one of them is one of these Tree of Self trees. All of them are simultaneously releasing a fragrance that affects all the incarnations, while simultaneously absorbing the emotional energy of the incarnations. The absorbed emotional energy then gets turned into nourishment for the fruit of the tree of self, which Midas still had no idea what it was or how it would affect him if he ingested it. Midas thought about the fragrance that is apparently being released and realized it might be a fragrance that causes people to become overly emotional easily, thus allowing the trees to absorb more emotions to form fruits. This idea conformed to the law of least action that seems to permeate the universe. If the trees require emotional energy in the form of pheromone emissions, then the easiest way to get as much of those would be to induce more in the tree's prey. If that was the case, Midas and everyone in this forest could be in trouble. Overly emotional states cause irrationality, and irrationality causes danger to oneself or others. If these trees were releasing a pheromone that was making everyone emotional, Midas needed to figure out if he could counteract this somehow, in case he was adversely affected. Midas thought about the rate of progress and figured that it might be related to the number of incarnations around and the concentration of emotions around the trees. He and Julio had been under the tree for almost 7 hours, and in this time it had filled up one of the seeds to 1%. This meant that it would not take much time to grow a fruit in the case where there were a large number of people congregating together. Considering the number of people in this place, fruit would probably form quickly in some areas, maybe even in days. Thinking this far, Midas decided to stop hesitating and activated Memory of the World on the seed in his hand. Immediately, his mind was flooded by all kinds of emotional states simultaneously. An anxiety that would make anyone despair, followed by a confidence that could break any barrier. A boredom that causes the whole world to come to a standstill, followed by an intrigue that paints the world in every color at once. A frustration that makes one want to destroy the world, followed by an epiphany that makes one want to create new things. A dispiritedness that would make one feel like they have lost everything, followed by an enthusiasm that makes one feel like a king. A terror that would make one feel afraid and threatened, followed by an excitement that would make one feel fearless and bold. A humiliation that would reduce one to his lowliest form, followed by a pride that would engulf the universe. He felt them all. Everything. At once. After a few seconds in that state, he snapped out of it and started involuntarily hyperventilating. His mind apparently could not bear being stimulated to such an extent. Even then he wanted to cry and laugh and curl up and spread himself out and live and die. He was terrified. What the hell is this? Thought Midas apprehensively. Whether Midas meant the fruit seeds, or his memory of the world skill, even he didn't know. He took a moment to calm himself down. There was something else he felt back then, but he wasn't sure if it was true. In that moment, he felt something else, something he had felt before. Emotionless bliss. When he was in the Great Library during his actualization test, he had first come across this feeling by mistake as an escape for his deteriorating mental state. His memory of those events were as clear as day. Due to the isolation and the mountains of books and data that he had to go through during the next few, possibly millions of years of his stay in the library, Midas found himself becoming more and more frustrated each day. This frustration made him incapable of even completing the easiest of children's books. This, combined with the inability to sleep and feel pain, caused an anger and wrath inside him that he had never felt before in his life. An anger that almost caused Midas to attempt to take his own life. Midas one day wanted to test out how ridiculous the physical state negation really was. Midas started small. He found himself punching a wall with all the force his body could muster, which was a lot considering the fact that he is in a perpetual peak state. Boom. When he withdrew his hand and looked at the damage, he found nothing. He didn't feel pain. He didn't feel bones breaking. He felt nothing. How frustrating. How could it be possible for him to feel no pain whatsoever? This was a puzzle he had to solve no matter what. Or at least that is what he was telling himself as he began hurting himself in every way imaginable. He stubbed his toe on the staircase. Fell down on his knees with no pain or discomfort. Stood up and kept walking. He banged his head on a wall after a lengthy run up. Bounced back with no discomfort or confusion or anything. He fashioned a spear out of one of the numerous table legs that exist in the library. It turned out he was the only indestructible existence. Everything else was fair game. After creating and sharpening this spear, he attempted to stab himself in the stomach. However, the spear could not penetrate him at all. He fastened the spear perpendicular to the wall and ran up to it to impale himself. However, he merely bounced back again. When he checked up on the spear, he realized that it had stress fractures along its length. He did not get hurt, but his spear did? That brought him to that crucial moment. He rationalized that instead of stabbing, maybe fracturing or dislocating bones could work. He was going to drop down from the table and land on the floor, but the high metal railing would most definitely push his arm up. Luckily, he had fastened the counterweight on the other side of the arm to make sure that it would force the arm's midsection to bear enormous pressure and thus break or dislocate bones. "Haha, this is definitely going to work," said Midas, sporting a crazed look on his face. Without saying anything else, he jumped off the table. Bonk crash asterisk. The arm, which Midas had expected to break, stayed intact, and instead, the other side with the counterweight got pulled up inexplicably. The counterweight, made of encyclopedia books that were strung up together, could not hold up to the upward force that was exerted on them, and that led to them crashing onto the floor. Fuck, it's impossible. It's impossible. No, screamed Midas while running up the stairs. I just need more height. Energy is the product of the mass, gravity, and the difference in height. I couldn't apply enough energy to break it because there wasn't enough height. That's right. After a few minutes, Midas stood on the corridor of the 18th floor and looked down at the lobby of the main building. He dragged a step ladder which would normally be used to reach hard-to-reach books off the tops of bookshelves and dragged it all the way to the side railings of the corridor. After climbing onto the railing and looking down, he realized that he could see the side railings of every floor beneath him from here. Okay. I can test it now. I have to test it. There was still a voice of reluctance in his head telling him not to do this, but he didn't care anymore. He was going to do it. He was going to jump. And so, with a spring forward, Midas jumped into the air and started free falling to the ground floor lobby. While in midair, his thoughts were ringing in his head. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? I'm gonna die. Please, somebody, make it stop. Well done, Midas. You've gone absolutely insane. Midas smiled wryly to himself, thinking about how frail the human psyche is for being vulnerable to that extent. What he had experienced was the onset of psychotic episodes on multiple occasions even after that event. The only way he ultimately came out of it was by later meditating and attaining inner peace. That was when he got his first taste of emotional bliss, an emotionless state whereby one feels everything but nothing at the same time. He used that as a platform to rebuild himself and change for the better, thus allowing him to continue the actualization test and complete it. Okay, I'm going on a tangent now, let us deal with this current issue first, thought Midas. Midas refocused himself on his current problems. What did his feelings and visions mean exactly? What was the nature of his memory of the world skill? Midas rationalized the situation to his best abilities and could not come up with a reasonable explanation for his experience. It seemed memory of the world would need some more investigation. With regards to these seeds, considering the fact that they were incomplete, Midas would not eat them. He would rather find someone else to test it out. Ideally someone without a link to Midas. Midas augmented his future plans with these ideas in mind and continued with what he was doing previously. Okay, next. Eye of Truth, thought Midas, and immediately the world around him changed. What the fuck? Chapter 16, the meaning of information. All sorts of colors and shapes floated around him. He looked towards the trees and noticed that there were green-colored tendrils flowing out of the leaves and onto the space around the bodies of Midas and Julio. Midas looked towards the sleeping Julio only to notice that those tendrils looked like tree roots, but they moved like tentacles that were fighting against each other over some yellow particles that were leaving his body. What is that? Thought Midas. But he noticed something else that was weird with Julio at this moment. Some round lights could be found inside his body, one found on the base of his spine that glowed a bloody red color and the other could be found at Julio's navel and it glowed a bright yellow color. No way. Chakras, thought Midas after his divine database sparked with some inspiration from the spiritual texts he had found in the library. Those positions were the exact same positions as the ones written in the holy books. The resemblance was uncanny. Midas looked everywhere else on Julio's body and could not find any other bright glowing orb. He found some intertwined colors flowing all around, turning Julio's body into some kind of colorful painting. There was no way those orbs were chakras, right? In the modern world, chakras were thought to be energy centers that regulated a person and provided subtle energies that someone needed to coexist with the world and regulate their mind, body, organs, and intellect. There were 7 chakras and regulating each chakra energy center would allow someone to have a sense of their subtle body, or soul, and become one with their universe. In recent times, spirituality has taken a back seat with the advent of scientific progress though. The only people who still believe in or even practice anything remotely related to chakras would be yoga enthusiasts. What people don't know is that the earliest mentions of ideas correlating to chakras could be found dating back to 500 to 1500 BC India in the ancient spiritual texts called the Vedas. In the teachings, the chakras refer to spinning wheels of energy that correlate to major bodily functions. The chakras must stay in alignment for a human being's bodily functions to operate at peak capacity. The most interesting aspect of misalignment is its ability to affect a human physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Midas knew though, that these may not be the same chakras spoken of in those Hindu texts. If these were chakras, why did Julio only have 2 that glowed? What were all these floating colors, objects, and shapes? What was the situation with his body like? And what the hell were those tentacles doing? His curiosity was beyond palatable at this point. He vowed to collect more information and unravel this mystery. Midas found it unnerving how there were trees that were capable of absorbing emotions, and yet his skill showed him some tentacle-like outgrowths of what seemed to be ethereal energies that were sucking out yellow particles from both Midas and Julio. He tried to wave them away from himself, but he could not even touch them. Midas was apprehensive. These trees did not seem as innocent as they looked. The trees had the orbs too, as Midas spotted an orange orb and a yellow orb on the insides of all the trees around him. What made the situation worse was that he could now see some gaseous purple particles being emitted by the trees, and the purple was everywhere around Midas, even inside his body. Midas noticed that around him, these yellow particles he was emitting were getting more concentrated as it seemed he was emitting more. It was probably due to his frenzied emotional state. Midas tried to calm down and saw that there were less yellow particles that were being sucked from him. Terrifying, thought Midas. He was not sure if these things could kill him. He was sure that whatever they were doing was without his consent, and he was weak to resist. That irked him to no end. He hated that feeling. Midas looked at his own body in search of those glowing orbs and could not see a single one. Wait, why don't I have them? Why is it only Julio, thought Midas, puzzled. After thinking some more, he consoled himself, thinking, maybe mine are the higher ones? Like the third eye. That direction of thinking led to an even deeper question. Why him? What was the significance and meaning of the difference? Although he was consoling himself, it may be true. He could not see the final 3 chakras located at the throat, at the center of the mid-brow and the upper skull. Among those 3, 1 or 2 of them may be a glowing orb he just could not see. He turned his skill off, sensing that he might enter into that weakened state again if he kept pushing it. That headache was a nightmare to have, and Midas would rather not experience that again. Immediately, the world returned to its previous form, with darkness all around except for the illumination of the flames. Midas stood up and grabbed some branches to throw into the flames and sat back down, continuing his crafting. He also spent some moments digesting his discoveries. Although he did not understand most of what he saw, he had this curiosity about it and his mind roved on and on about the possible meanings. In the moment, Midas had felt a fear grip him, but now, knowing that these lights and energies existed, he became excited at unraveling their meanings. Most people would have panicked seeing ethereal tentacles surrounding and sucking lights out of them, but Midas was excited instead. It meant that there was so much for him to learn still. After another hour or so of crafting and introspection, Midas resolved himself to test out the final skill in his authority of omniscience. Hidden Divinity, LV1. Hide information from the world. Change information in creation. Deceive the universe. God, please, no more tentacles, haha. Hidden Divinity. When he focused on the concept, he came to understand that there was a shroud around him that hung like a dark cloud over his body. But he was surprised as he did not see any colors, but instead saw himself. He felt like he could hide himself from the world. Like an infinitely powerful stealth ability. Is it just stealth? Thought Midas, disappointed. Every other skill had given him a surprise and this skill just felt like a bit of a letdown. When he thought back to the behavior of the tentacles previously, he realized that it was almost as if they could not see or find him, as they merely gravitated around him, while for Julio, the tentacles would invade his body and touch him at times. Midas thought that the difference between the way he and Julio were being treated may have something to do with this stealth skill. He thought about it more and realized that this skill had always been active. Looking at the description and understanding that this was a skill from his authority, Midas felt like it could not be this simple. What other possibilities could it be hiding? Index, thought Midas, and that very same blue panel materialized itself. But this time, Midas noticed that it was different. Midas instinctively felt that he could edit the index. Maybe that was the true definition of deceive the universe. Midas changed some information and on his index into a form that he liked. This was a more realistic form that would let him blend in better. He would hide his high AC and his authority, and augment his gift to some extent. He would hide anything potentially threatening about himself, making himself seem more normal, and maybe just a bit outstanding. Index Network Statistics. Earth name, Midas Mira. AC, 8,300. Gift, Gift of Knowledge, a rank. The Gift of Knowledge, a rank. The memory of the world is with you. This gift enhances the ability to communicate with the universe, receive knowledge from it, and give knowledge to it. Skills, Eye of Judgment, LV1, Information Database, LV1, Memory of the World, LV1. Eye of Judgment, LV1. View the information of all existences in creation. Information Database, LV1. A database holding some of your memories and knowledge, with methods that allow access and utilization of memories in high-level ways. Memory of the World, LV1. Access the memory of any existence based on some conditions. Conditions and states. Nature, neutral evil. Trait, hyperintuitive. Mental, narcissistic personality, paranoia, anxiety. Physical. Stats. Dexterity, agility, flexibility, 1.6. Strength, speed, power, 1.4. Constitution, endurance, health, 1.3. Intelligence, memory, reasoning, 5.7. Charisma, charm, persuasion, 4.0. Wisdom, intuition, adaptability, 4.5. Spirit, mental state, character, 1.9. Not bad, thought Midas with a smile on his face. If hidden divinity could really deceive others, then if they had an information viewing skill, this is what they would see. Midas was excited to use this index page later on, to fool others into thinking whatever he wanted them to think. The first person Midas had to fool was lying next to him with a dumb look on his face and drool sliding down the side of his cheek. Midas would convince Julio to be his comrade. And then he would finally have someone with physical capabilities by his side that he does not possess. Midas understood that it was only a matter of time until people became violent in this secluded place. With no laws and regulations, a conflict for space and resources was bound to happen soon enough. Physically capable chosen would be pivotal in surviving in a world of violence. Midas thought even further about hidden divinity, and realized that this ability to control the flow of information was a heaven-defying ability. Midas had always been fascinated by information. Actually, the whole of humanity had always been fascinated by the concept since the dawn of civilization. Around 10,000 to 20,000 years ago, humans discovered that they could represent ideas in the form of images on clay, representing the first recorded ideas in history. Then, they took the concept a step further by representing concepts not as images, but as the sound one makes when recalling an image, and thus evolved their whole concept of information and ability to share ideas with others using symbols and characters. After thousands of years, this led to human language being the way it is today. But in the 19th century they realized that they could stretch this further. In the age of electricity and early transmission, humanity created a way to share information across borders using long and short beeping and sweeping that could later be retranslated back into normal spoken word. That is the story of Morse code and the telegram. Later, humanity discovered a mathematically structured way of sharing information in the form of binary digits, or bits, and this discovery later revolutionized the way people experience information nowadays. A normal human would use their phone to swipe through social media posts without recognizing that every pixel on the screen of their phone is a block of information containing even more information on position, color, size, feedback. Even now, in 2024, humans are still rediscovering the depth of their ability to mold and shape information with the advent of quantum computing. According to the latest science, the concept even applies itself to the laws of energy, entropy, and dynamics in the universe. According to information theory, information can be analyzed in the same way as any other physical quantity. It can even be seen to move, transform, reshape, and decay like any existence. That is because information is a physical existence. It is as if every subatomic particle was something like a pixel on the cell phone screen on the universe, containing vast swathes of information and data that when viewed in the whole could be interpreted as something meaningful. If hidden divinity allowed him control over information, that was effectively giving him free rein over physical existence itself. Full control over physical existence. Midas felt his heartbeat rate increase sharply at the implications of his reasoning. When Midas thought about all the uses hidden divinity possibly had, and all the uses he had not discovered yet, he became even more excited for the future. Maybe he could hide aspects of things? Maybe even hide the total existence of things? Maybe even create new things. Midas kept working at his wooden tools until the sun rose in the morning. The whole time, he had an inexplicable smile on his face that no person could decipher. Chapter 17, Courting Death. The sun had just begun to peek over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the forest. The air was crisp and cool, and the only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Midas and Julio were walking through the forest as the layer of grass and leaves would create a crunch beneath their step. "Hey Midas! Are you having a flashback about that little girl again?" "Listen brother, let me tell you," said Julio, but before he could continue on with his advice, he was interrupted by Midas, who rolled his eyes while saying, "No, I'm not thinking about that. I'm just reminiscing about what I did during the night." They were currently walking through the forest toward the north side in an effort to find the river and thus water. They weren't alone on this path. They had come across multiple people going up towards the river and down towards the shrine. It seemed that the river really did exist and everyone was in good spirits because of it. Even if they didn't have food, at least they had water for now. Midas knew that a normal human could survive for over 2 weeks without food, but without water, that number becomes a mere 3 days. He needed to find an edge, and he figured he had already found some clues for it. "Eh? What were you doing?" said Julio. "I was reading the Testament 0 of the Holy Book. It's actually a way to learn the language, you know. I was also investigating this place and I found out that it's actually not safe," said Midas with a serious look on his face while controlling the volume of his voice to its absolute lowest levels possible so as to not be heard. "I know. It's the people, right? You didn't see it back there, but I saw a guy spit fire out of his mouth to start a fire back at that camp." "What kind of magic skill is that?" whispered Julio incredulously, to which Midas nodded seriously. Before Midas could say anything though, Julio said, "By the way, why are we whispering when there is nobody around here?" "You never know, Julio, what if someone had a gift that made their hearing better?" "I'm merely trying to make sure that people don't know what I'm thinking or doing. Especially people from back there," said Midas secretly while pointing back towards the direction of the shrine. Julio nodded in understanding, but he still couldn't get why Midas was so guarded. There was something else Julio wanted to know that had been bugging him for a long time. "I've been wondering, why didn't you buy the apples?" Midas merely looked at him with a cunning smile and asked, "Would you buy an apple for $10,000? Julio was stunned, and then he laughed and said, "It's obvious, it's a no." "Fine, what about $10 million?" asked Midas. Julio felt like this was an obvious question, so he said, "Hell no." Midas laughed and then he said, "Then why would you buy an apple for 10 AC? Julio looked skeptical at him and asked, "So you mean that AC might have the same value as $1 million? I don't know yet. And that's exactly why I will guard my AC with my life. Who knows what uses there are for it? Why would I spend it on 100 calories worth of energy?" Seeing that Julio was starting to get it, Midas continued, "Julio, a human needs approximately 1,500 calories a day. That's 15 apples, which is 150 AC, imagine. And, what's worse is that if someone eats too many apples, there could be serious consequences to health. But of course they would never tell people that, would they? They are just trying to accumulate AC because they are sure it's useful, even if they have to make people sick to do so." "What? Apples can make you sick?" asked Julio, to which Midas responded, "Too many apples can make you sick. It's okay to eat one or two, but after that, the fiber inside the apple will make you constipated and maybe even bloated. There are even worse things that could happen due to blood sugar inflation and so on and so forth. You get it now? This is also the reason why I didn't join their group back then. If they are capable of smiling to our faces while keeping knives hidden behind their backs, are they even worth respecting?" Julio thought about it and after some time he nodded to himself. Midas kept a straight face from the side, but inwardly he felt like he was on the right track. The seed was already there. He would just have to nurture it and it would grow into something beautiful and useful to his own ends. And what were his ends? Midas wanted Julio to rely solely on him. Julio might not be the strongest, but that did not matter because Midas could handle him. Midas knew he would need a bit more time to convince Julio to think negatively about the group. He even slightly exaggerated his points just to bring about a slight mistrust. As long as there was a slight mistrust, Julio would unconsciously pay more attention to any negatives and naturally grow his mistrust all by himself. This mistrust would then end up becoming a paranoia of all the groups that could form. This was just how the human brain worked. Whatever a human pays attention to ends up growing in his mind. They think more about it, until they start seeing reflections of their thoughts in reality. "You know what, I knew that those guys were fishy." "Did the big guy attack you earlier on?" asked Julio with some anger on his face. Seeing that he was about to turn back and do something he would probably regret, Midas held him back. "Hey! What are you doing?" "Yeah, he kinda attacked me, but it was a mental attack, I think." "You felt it too, right? It was a killing intent kind of thing or something." "I don't know, I couldn't tell," said Midas vaguely, while turning Julio back towards the north and dragging him away. Midas had a placating smile on his face, but inwardly, he was sweating. What did this guy think he was going to do by going back there? Frank's stats were double of Julio's stats. Julio would get destroyed. Annihilated. "Yeah, I felt it," said Julio while letting himself be dragged away. Seeing that, Midas decided to add, "I think that guy might even be stronger than you, Julio. Who knows, he might be an A rank. Or maybe even," said Midas. He shook his head and released Julio from his grip, saying, "Are you trying to die?" "Pfft. Even if he was an S rank, I would smash him if he tried anything," said Julio while following Midas. Midas kept shaking his head while chuckling. "Oh yeah, that tall woman wearing a dress. What else did she say?" "Gwen. She basically tried to sell us apples and then she said that we should share any information we find. And I think she tried to use a charming skill on me. Actually, I'm sure she did it. What? Whoa, these guys are something else. How did you notice it? Asked Julio with incredulity written on his face. I was normal, but then I found myself unable to breathe and I wanted to bow down to her. I felt like she was the center of my world. That's so unlike me. It was really scary, Julio. Just be glad you were not the one that she did that to. Actually, now that I think about it, she might be using her skill on people to make them work for her, said Midas. This was a logical thing, as if he had her skills, this was what he would do too. Julio was livid though. What? We have to tell people about this. Tell them what? We have no evidence. She could deny it, and the people she has under her could deny it under her orders too. Basically from now on, I'm gonna try to stay away from her. I think she's more scary than that Frank guy. Julio kept quiet, but Midas could tell that he understood the situation. More than anything, Midas was trying to implant the idea of mistrusting anyone that wasn't him into Julio. If Julio kept seeing how dangerous other people were, he would try his best to stick with what he knew. And what he knew, or at least thought he knew, was Midas. Now you understand why I wanted to get the fuck away from those people as fast as I could? Hey, let's stop talking about those guys. The book. Make sure you read it. I'm serious, Julio. My intuition is telling me that the book is really important. Yeah, I get it, Mr. Intuition. I'm serious. It might allow us to get food in this place, or maybe learn the secrets of where we are or even why we're here. So you have to promise me. Haha, okay, I promise. You know, my little brother liked books, said Julio with a smile on his face. Oh. Julio, said Midas with a sympathetic expression on his face. Julio shook his head and said, it's okay. Midas could tell that Julio was feeling some homesickness at this time. He also figured that he may be the overprotective brother type with loads of regrets, and when he thought this far he formulated some ways to get Julio to trust him more. His homesickness would go away soon enough. Midas would become his new home. Midas and Julio traveled like this, passing by some other early risers on the way to the river. Midas kept thinking about and analyzing the indexes he swiped from the people he passed by at the shrine location. Most of them weren't anything special. He also decided to show them to Julio to keep him aware of the stronger people. There were 7 South rankers at that place, and some of them had the most interesting abilities. Julio, upon seeing the index screens, was even more surprised. Midas explained this as his eye of judgment, and he also explained that the only reason he used it was because those guys used their skills on him first. Otherwise, he would never violate someone's privacy like that. After hearing Midas' explanation, Julio was even more sure that Midas was a good guy. He was just a bit shy, that's all. He started going through the indexes with Midas and was shocked at the variety of abilities. Index, Earth name, Frank Del Fidero AC, 10,200 Gift of Transformation, S rank, the Gift of Transformation, S rank, your form can be whatever you desire. You are all forms and no forms simultaneously. Skills, Morph, LV1, Evolution, LV1, Matter Contortion, LV1, Morph, Level 1, you can change your body according to your understanding and imagination for a certain amount of time. Evolution, LV1, you can adapt to any environment quicker using the most efficient physical adaptation. Matter Contortion, LV1, you can change the shape of objects you touch based on some conditions. Conditions and states, Nature, Chaotic Neutral Trait, Destroyer Mental, Antisocial Personality, Machiavellian Personality Physical, Stats, Dexterity, Agility, Flexibility, 2.2 Strength, Speed, Power, 6.2 Constitution, Endurance, Health, 5.7 Intelligence, Memory, Reasoning, 2.0 Charisma, Charm, Persuasion, 2.0 Wisdom, Intuition, Adaptability, 1.0 Spirit, Mental State, Character, 1.2, this Frank guy is a destroyer, huh? Said Julio in contemplation. Could he win against this guy? Destroyer? Geez. More like monster, you would have gotten destroyed if you started a fight, said Midas before he swiped the screen away to view Gwen's index. Bah. I still have a chance, said Julio, not backing off in the slightest. Index Network Statistics, Earth Name, Gwen Cho AC, 11,300 Gift of Influence, S rank, the Gift of Influence, S rank, your voice cannot be ignored, your orders are obeyed by all in the world. Skills, Dominate, LV1, Mesmerizing Eye, LV1, Mind Shift, LV1, Dominate, Level 1, you can create, control, negate and facilitate any functions of the minds of others with some conditions. Mesmerizing Eye, LV1, influence the emotions of others, making them more friendly and trusting and attracted towards you and your ideas. Mind Shift, LV1, you have direct control of your mental structure and can influence your own mind as you wish. Conditions and states, nature, lawful evil trait, commander mental, Machiavellian personality, histrionic personality physical, anorexia nervosa, stats, dexterity, agility, flexibility, 1.1 strength, speed, power, 0.9 constitution, endurance, health, 1.2 intelligence, memory, reasoning, 2.7 charisma, charm, persuasion, 5.9 wisdom, intuition, adaptability, 3.0 spirit, mental state, character, 6.2, whoa. Really impressive. And really dangerous. That lawful evil trait is a big red flag, haha, said Midas. Her charisma is so high, damn. She had the makings of a tyrant. Actually, Frank and Gwen both did. He felt bad for all those innocent people who were going to be spun into their web. That is if these two people can even work together in the long run. Midas continued looking through his findings with Julio on their journey. He realized that the lower the rank of gift received, the lower the stat changes would be. F ranks would be more human-like. Then E ranks would have stats multiplied by 2, while D and C rank would have some stats multiplied by 3 to 4 times of a human's. Then B and A ranks would have some stats multiplied by 4 to 5 that of a human's, and finally, S ranks would have stats multiplied by 5 to 6 times. Midas thought about it and realized that his stats may actually be crazy. His intelligence was a whopping 9. Why? Was it because of the authority? His divine database had also gotten some results which he was about to analyze by himself this time, when, hey, you guys are going to the river too? Midas and Julio passed by a group that were apparently coming from the river. They looked like a mixed group of men and women who got along. When Midas focused, he noticed that they were now approaching a clearing. Supposedly, in the clearing, was a river with a waterfall on the right that flowed from right to left according to Midas' perspective. Yeah. Why? Is there a problem? Asked Julio. Problem? Maybe, maybe not. There's a bunch of people who are kicking others away while saying that they want to take a bath. The worst thing is that they're doing it upstream. What? There's no way. What did those others say? Said Midas with an amused smile on his face. Humans. Haha, they wanted to fight, but there was a girl who froze some guy into a snowball, so they figured they would let them do their thing. Ptahaha. Julio couldn't help but laugh, to which someone at the front sneered and jeered, "What are you laughing at? Caveman." Then there was laughter between another group of 5 who stood in the forest as if waiting. Midas noticed that one of those guys was pale and shivering with his teeth clattering. I see, thought Midas. These guys were humiliated and now they finally got a way to vent their frustrations. Losers. Midas inwardly shook his head, but outwardly, he was estimating their strength in case things got violent. Julio could take these guys. But he still held his hand up, signifying to Julio that he shouldn't get affected, but it seems like those men noticed this as one of them continued. No wonder he has a spear, he's walking around with a black person. Pfft, backwards and uncivilized as expected, added another person, to which the rest laughed. What else can you expect from a fucking monkey, am I right? Ha ha ha. Kikik. The laughs and jeers immediately turned the atmosphere a bit cold. This was when Midas turned towards the 5 men with a gentle smile on his face. Okay, you know what? Let's kill them. Chapter 18, Annihilating Those Idiots. What did you say? What do you think we said? You third world country people are disgusting monkeys, all of you, said a talkative blonde guy, to which they all began to laugh. Before Midas could even make a move, Julio had already pounced forward with the vigor of a beast. His body accelerated at the inhuman rate of possibly 40 meters per second, which Midas calculated would allow Julio to reach the closest of the group in the time of 0.5 seconds. Midas could keep up because his brain was working at full speed trying to analyze and coordinate with Julio. It was too late to stop him now, so he might as well join him. Eye of judgment, eye of truth, thought Midas while running forward. With his speed, he knew he would get there after 1.6 seconds at least, considering his top speed and the environment of the grass and any other obstacles that might hinder him. He decided to guide Julio as best as he could using the skill descriptions of the men. Midas read the index of the man Julio was pouncing at and immediately found something problematic. Gift of Corrosion, C rank, with skills that are capable of melting someone's skin on touching, and a projectile release skill on top. Julio, watch out for corrosive skills, said Midas while following. Meanwhile, he was also analyzing what they were doing in the meantime. 0.5 seconds passed. The men were startled that these 2 weak-looking guys had made a move, and by the time Julio had stabbed his spear's blunt end into the talkative guy's ribcage, knocking air out of his lungs in the process and almost incapacitating him with his raw strength, they began to react. Midas, with his eye of truth, found out that some color specks inside 2 of the guys were rotating and moving as if they were going to manifest themselves. He had previously inferred that this is what happens during the activation of a skill. Back at the apple tree, Midas had already activated his eye of truth. He had noticed Gwen's blue-colored specks located at her throat start rotating and moving and shaping themselves when she looked him deep in the eyes, but that didn't mean much to him until he later discovered that she had a skill called Mesmerizing Eye. Then he noticed a little girl's indigo-colored specks start rotating, moving, and shaping themselves into incomprehensible shapes while she was staring at Midas, and when Midas activated his eye of judgment, he discovered that she had an appraisal skill of B rank. He figured that his eye of truth could give him insight into when people activate skills. The discovery was enlightening and also meant that Midas had more options in future confrontations with others. He now had an opportunity to analyze people's battle plans in real time and react to them. More interestingly, this time it was a green orb located at the chest area that was releasing lights. Midas noted all of this and would explore its meaning soon enough. He pulled up the 2 men's info and found out their gifts and skills, thinking Gift of Speed, B rank, has an ability that makes things slower and affect inertia. Gift of Barriers, C rank, has an ability that can put up barriers. Midas thought okay, so they are going to slow him down and block him, allowing the 2 other guys with the powerful B rank Gift of the Moon to transform into a wolf, and B rank Gift of Light to release a flash of light, blinding Julio, or maybe a laser to destroy him. They don't care about me, do they? Thinking this far, Midas threw his spear at the bearer of the Gift of Speed with the intent to knock him out or kill him if he was unlucky, aiming for his head. With the millions of years of practice Midas had in the library, he was an expert spear thrower, and his spear reached the bearer of the Gift of Speed at almost the same time as Julio was about to reach him. The man, obviously sensing the threat, focused his momentum-altering skill on the spear, allowing Julio free access to him if he wanted. But the other man had erected an invisible barrier in front of both of them. 0.7 seconds had passed. Julio, jump left. There's a wall. Almost immediately, Julio jumped left and went around the invisible barrier. Before anyone could react, Julio stabbed the bearer of the Gift of Speed with a spear in his stomach, causing him to curl over while coughing and drooling like an idiot. Julio obviously used the blunt of the spear, otherwise, there would have been blood and guts everywhere, causing Midas to be impressed with him. Even when he was angry, he could still keep his composure and rationalize what to do and not to do. Julio continued to punch the bearer of the Gift of Barrier in the face, causing him to bleed out of his nose and fly back, landing on top of the bearer of the gift of the moon. 0.9 seconds had passed. Use unbreakable, screamed Midas, seeing the bearer of the gift of light charging up a skill. The bearer of the gift of the moon was also charging up, but having been impeded by the act of saving his friend, he would probably waste some time. In Midas' vision, Julio's inner body's blood-red specks started swirling and shaping themselves. His skin started darkening as if layers and layers of it were growing on top of it. Julio kept moving forward towards the two remaining men while Midas was gaining from the back. At this moment, the bearer of the gift of light's skill had finished charging up and he raised both his hands to his chest, with his hands assuming a diamond shape. A myriad of lights converged in the middle, ready to be shot out at any moment. Midas calculated the trajectory of the shot, realizing that the man was aiming for Julio's head. Midas wanted to tell Julio to dodge down, but the speed of light would always eclipse the speed of sound. He would have to depend on Julio to somehow make it through by his skill, ability, and luck. He had already prepared as best as Julio could handle by having him become unbreakable for some time. The rest would be in Julio's hands. Midas leaned forward, preparing to roll on the floor. He would make sure to grab some soil and grass in the process. 1.1 seconds had passed. Zoom, a beam of light lit up the forest. Julio had dodged it by leaning his head left at the last moment. This guy. Before the bearer of the gift of the light could blast another beam, Julio was already upon him. The guy, realizing that Julio was already here, tried to throw a punch, but it was too late. Julio dodged the punch, and threw one of his own, dislocating the guy's jaw and knocking him out in the process. But before Julio could continue his rampage, Bush Julio was thrashed away backwards, towards the left of Midas's current position. In front of Midas and Julio stood a large 2-meter-tall man-beast with the body of a man and the head of a wolf. Rower. It had a line of drool running down its face with a deranged appearance that visualized its anger and hatred at the two weaklings before it. Blood-red pupils stared at both Julio and Midas. Julio paused somewhat, affected by the intimidating presence of the beast before him, allowing Midas to catch up. 1.6 seconds passed. It's strong but it's dumb. Go, berserk, said Midas while running forward and picking up his spear lying next to a collapsed gift of speed bearer. Julio imperceptibly nodded and ran at the beast. Midas calculated that he was 0.4 seconds behind. He tossed the soil he had collected into his hand straight into the beast's eyes, forcing the beast to close its eyes in irritation. Julio used that moment to get close to the beast and send 3 rapid punches into its sides where a normal human's liver would be. Midas couldn't help but be impressed at Julio's battle sense. A powerful blow at the right place could destroy any opponent. Roar, howled the beast, while trying to separate itself from these pests. It swiped left and right with its large arms but felt no contact at all, which seemingly sent it into an even more furious state. Because of the dirt thrown by Midas, it could not see anything and thus could not deal with Julio's taunting but powerful blows using his arms and spear. All it could do was swipe left and right, trying to give itself some respite. Roar. Rahag. Midas finally reached the beast at this moment. The beast, as if sensing another danger, began flailing even wilder. Julio leaped backwards while Midas donkey rolled again and stabbed its side, aiming for a bloodied wound on its belly, and managed to slice the beast open. Ah-ur. The beast wailed in pain, and turned away in the opposite direction from Midas and Julio's attacks and ran with all its might, even faster than Julio. Midas calculated it to be 64 meters per second. Even if Midas and Julio followed, they may not catch up, so Midas decided to say, "Don't chase, Julio." Before long Midas saw a spectacular sight. In his eye of truth, vision, the green particles all around nature were drawn and shaped. Then suddenly, out of the direction of the beast's escape, which happened to coincide with the river's location, a domineeringly cold voice sounded. "How dare you?" Boom whoosh asterisk asterisk schwa asterisk, a loud booming sound followed by a raging cold wind. Midas looked around and could perceptibly see the trees around gaining some frost on them. He could even feel the temperature in the surroundings get even colder than it was previously. cold, thought Midas at this moment. The clearing at the front had been taken over by snow and turned into a tundra. Midas came from the southern hemisphere, so he rarely saw snow, but he was sure that right there was a scene from the coldest winters. "What the fuck?" said Julio in fear and disbelief. And Midas understood. If someone was capable of changing their environment like this, they must be strong. That wolf was fucked. And sure enough, out of the frozen tundra stepped a group of women with their numbers counting to 16. They were all beauties, and the most eye-catching one stood among them with light blue hair and a white dress. Her skin white as snow, her eyes baby blue like oceans. She seemed almost dainty and fragile, and yet the look in her eyes was domineering and powerful. Her eyes were like the coldest fire that people could not stare at too long with fear that they could never look away anymore. Midas had never seen such a beautiful woman before. Well, he had, according to his divine database, but she had changed so much from any known images that existed of her that she seemed almost foreign. Her hair used to be a light blonde and her eyes did not radiate their blue as much as they did now. She was like an ice goddess and a fire goddess at the exact time. Helga Gunnarsson from Greenland. A 22-year-old CEO running her own women's beauty product company. Her record's clean, her social media is impeccable. Eye of judgment. Sheesh. Index network statistics, Earth name, Helga Gunnarsson AC, 10,900 gift of kinetic manipulation, S rank, the gift of kinetic manipulation, S rank, you can shape, manipulate and create the kinetic energy in the world around you. You control the absolute temperature. Skills, thermal manipulation, LV1, thermal body, LV1, kinesis, LV1, thermal manipulation, level 1, you can induce any absolute temperature possible in and around you, thermal body, LV1, adaptation to any temperature conditions greatly increases. The body can embody kinetic energy for some time. Kinesis, LV1, you can control the energies of objects and their movements, conditions and states, nature, neutral evil trait, cold-hearted mental, avoidant personality, borderline personality physical, stats, dexterity, agility, flexibility, 3.2 strength, speed, power, 2.1 constitution, endurance, health, 2.1 intelligence, memory, reasoning, 2.7 charisma, charm, persuasion, 4.9 wisdom, intuition. Adaptability, 3.0 spirit, mental state, character, 5.9, Jesus fucking Christ. That's a cheat. How the hell does she have those stats and those skills in her little body, thought Midas. Why couldn't he have something like kinesis, which was basically like the gift of speed in and of itself? Midas wanted to get to know her. She was the strongest S-ranker, or at least she had the most potential according to Midas' judgment. So when she looked at him and he looked at her, they maintained eye contact with each other for a while with no person making the first move. "Was it your fault?" demanded a brown-haired girl beside the woman, seeing Midas not apologize for ruining their bath time. Midas turned towards the woman. "I'm guessing the doggie's been turned into a popsicle?" asked Midas with a mocking smile on his face. You ruined our bath time," said another woman. "You better give us an explanation," said another, and like that some of the women were putting in their 2 cents. Julio at this point stood forward to say, "They were insulting us, so we fought against them. That guy ran away towards you by himself. We didn't force him to do that." "Boo-hoo, I guess I'm not gonna force you to kneel down and apologize, now am I," said the brown-haired girl while raising her right hand. "Julio, step away from the trees." "Follow me," Midas said. And right after, vines radiated from the trees and attempted to bind Julio and Midas. But because they had stepped at the midpoint between trees and were too far, about 1 meter away from any surrounding trees, the vines' reach could do nothing against them. "What?" exclaimed the brown-haired girl. Hey. "Can we please get along?" said Midas with a placating smile. At this moment, the Ice Beauty spoke, saying, "How did you know?" Immediately, the scene came to a standstill, with just 2 people calmly looking at each other. Chapter 19, Aiden the conman. The look in her eyes could affect any man. But Midas is not like any other man. Midas smiled, but did not answer and merely put his hands up, saying, "Look, we're sorry. Since you've already dealt with him, then all we can do is thank you and apologize for our negligence in this matter. We sincerely apologize. If we had ended him earlier, he would not have disturbed you. Please forgive us, okay? By the way, did you kill him?" said Midas with an apologetic chuckle. "Do you really think Helga would?" said the brown-haired girl, but before she could continue speaking up for Helga, the woman raised her hand and shook her head, signifying that there was no need for the fuss. "So you guys did this?" asked Helga, looking at the carnage. 3 bodies were writhing on the floor, while their friend that was previously turned into a popsicle couldn't even move properly. Previously he had merely watched with trembling limbs while his new buddies were annihilated by these 2. He felt ashamed back then, especially since he is the weakest with a D-rank gift that wasn't even combat-related. Now, when he saw the blue-haired ice beauty again, he started visibly trembling, wanting to be as far as possible away from this walking disaster. Why did he have to want to join those girls in their bath? He tried his luck and ended up getting turned into a popsicle. Just thinking about it ran shivers down his spine. All he could do was remove himself and try to nurse his friends back to health. Hopefully they wouldn't despise him that much after remembering what happened. Midas also looked at the cowardly guy and smiled, turning back and saying, "I guess we have something in common." "I guess we do," said Helga, who smiled somewhat. Looking at the scurrying little pervert, she sneered and looked away as if keeping her eyes on him would dirty her. At that moment, the people who were watching from the sides, seeing that the tension had been eased somewhat, approached and started making merry. "Whoa, you guys are strong." "Yeah. What was that? That was insane. Those racist pieces of trash deserved it. Fuck yeah. I wish I could have been the one to smack them up a bit. Yeah, the guy named Julio is super strong, and fast." He went zoom, then boom, then bam, and suddenly 2 people were on the floor. Julio scratched his head and laughed shyly. "Bro, who are you? Most people didn't notice, but I saw that you knew these guys' skills before they used them. You were able to tell your friend exactly how to deal with the attacks," asked someone while fixing his glasses with his index and middle fingers like an anime character. "Wait, really? Whoa, that's super powerful. Is it like that appraisal skill in Japanese manga?" Midas merely smiled and said, "Well, I've seen them before. It's not really a big deal." Helga watched all this with the plainest face. None of the people there knew what was happening in her head. She and her group proceeded to start walking away from the scene back towards the shrine. The girls did not forget to send unfriendly glares at Midas on their way. Midas watched them leave with an odd look on his face. There were so many strong people around. So annoying. Midas and Julio and the rest of the people who were waiting for the flowers to complete whatever they were doing approached the clearing and saw one of the most beautiful scenes. Shaglug glug asterisk asterisk schwa asterisk. The river was wide and slow running, winding its way through the grass in the clearing. The water's clear and cold surface reflected the rays of the early morning sun, and the sound of the water rushing over the rocks is a constant in the air. The forest's trees were tall and green, and the sunshine running through the leaves cast dancing shadows on the water. The waterfall on the rightmost side was a beautiful sight in the morning light, with the water crashing down over the rocks in a powerful torrent. The spray from the waterfall hung in the air, radiating rainbow lights that made the place seem more magical than anything in the world. This was a place of peace and tranquility, and a great place to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life if Midas ever found himself back in the real world. But now, Midas found himself in this place filled with uncertainty and panic. He had to adapt as fast as possible. Right next to the river was a snow mountain, which was probably the wolf. Midas saw that the wolf was incapacitated and realized that at this rate, the wolf might die. Not to mention the fact that the wounds Midas and Julio had inflicted were bleeding in a perhaps fatal way. It was now cold and could suffer from hypothermia. Midas hesitated for a moment, but ended up shaking his head and approaching the wolf. "What are you doing?" asked Julio, to which Midas responded. "This guy is going to die if we just leave him like this." And like that, they spent several minutes digging the wolf out. After completely digging him out, they placed him on the ground in some sunlight, hoping that maybe he could warm up. At this moment, they watched as the wolf turned back into a human again, with all its scars now healed up. Midas clicked his tongue at those regenerative properties. Actually, the whole battle had been perfectly scripted by Midas, with the hopes of maximizing his chances of winning. If even one part of the plan had gone awry, things could have turned out much more different. Midas was grateful that Julio trusted him enough to follow his advice back there, otherwise who knows what could have happened. After dealing with the unconscious wolfman, Midas and Julio approached the river and used their water bottles to scoop up some water to drink. Although Julio was skeptical, Midas just went for it and drank the water. Julio shook his head, saying, "Didn't people just bathe here?" "Beautiful people just bathed here. Very beautiful people. I've never tasted water that was so sweet." "You should try it, Julio," said Midas while nodding his head with an ecstatic look on his face. Julio, seeing Midas' enjoyment plastered on his face, went ahead and drank the water. After sampling it and slapping his mouth together to get a nice taste of it, he said, "Hey. You said it was sweet," to which Midas laughed. Everyone all around was staring at Midas and Julio with jealousy. When did these guys find the time to make wooden bottles? Someone approached them and asked, "Hey, where did you guys get the water bottles?" The man had brown hair, with a golden brown skin complexion typically seen in people that occupy the Mediterranean. His height was 1.75 meters and his build was lean. He stood in front of Midas and Julio casually while wearing a white shirt and jeans. Clean image. Clean presentation. Is he a salesman? "We made them ourselves," said Midas. "Really, could you make one for me too?" asked the guy with a genuine smile on his face. Midas looked closely at him and the prompt his divine database gave him and thought to himself, a conman? Identity found. Name, Aidan Kaplan. DOB, July 10, 2001. Sex, male. ID number, 0107109987756111. Nationality, Turkey. Arrest report. Crime, fraud. Previous crimes, theft, forgery, extortion. He's definitely something special. He stole money through online scams and forged credit card details from his victims. Also it says he started doing this stuff at the age of 13? I really like him, thought Midas and decided to test him out. We could but, as you can see, we're in a bit of a situation. The only way to ensure mutual survival is mutual cooperation. Why don't you join us and be our comrade? I could fashion one for you in a few hours, said Midas. The man stood there with his hand scratching his chin, seemingly thinking about the offer. Midas took that moment to do his favorite thing nowadays. Eye of judgment. Index network statistics. Earth name, Aidan Kaplan. AC, 8900. Gift of mimicry, a rank. The gift of mimicry, a rank. Your ability to embody the world and its principles is unmatched. There is nothing you cannot replicate. Skills, shapeshifting, LV1, evolution, LV1, adoptive memory, LV1. Shapeshifting, level 1. Turn into a previously touched target with some conditions while inheriting the target's abilities. Evolution, LV1. Enhance traits of previously mimicked abilities and embody them in new forms. Adoptive memory, LV1. Remember some skills and natural abilities of previously mimicked forms with some conditions. Skill bank, fireball, LV1, speed up, LV1. Conditions and states. Nature, chaotic neutral. Trait, silver tongue. Mental, Machiavellian personality, paranoid personality. Physical. Stats. Dexterity, agility, flexibility, 1.0. Strength, speed, power, 1.4. Constitution, endurance, health, 1.1. Intelligence, memory, reasoning, 3.9. Charisma, charm, persuasion, 3.2. Wisdom, Intuition, Adaptability, 2.1. Spirit, Mental State, Character, 4.7. The man nodded to himself and reached out his hand for a handshake with Midas before saying, "Okay, it'll be nice cooperating with you from now on." "Oh, would you look at this guy? Cute," thought Midas. This con man wanted to copy his skills. At this moment, Midas was somewhat annoyed. Why do all the super powerful skills land up with everyone else? All he had was his powerful brain and his devilishly handsome face. Seeing this guy blatantly try this shit right in front of him, Midas felt like the universe was playing a joke on him. Midas looked at him and said, "I'm wondering what conditions there are to activate your skills. Is it stat supremacy or maybe skill rank supremacy? Tell me, which one is it?" After a moment of silence, the man pulled his arm away gracefully and said, "Ha ha ha, what do you mean?" Midas merely shook his head and said to him, "Don't worry, I understand. You're in a new place, a scary place, and you're trying to get as many advantages as possible, am I right?" Midas paused as if to let his words sink in and then continued, saying, "You saw what happened and heard what all those people said and figured that I might be useful to your goals. I get it. There's nothing wrong with that. So you really do have an appraisal skill, don't you?" said the man, now stepping back apprehensively, having seen how Midas and Julio dealt with those guys. Midas laughed and said, "Hey, why are you getting so shy? I didn't mean any harm or foul. I just want to be friends, that's all. And no, I don't have an appraisal skill, but I do know where you can get one." Midas then reached out his hands in a form of handshake and said, "My name is Midas. What's yours?" Now Aiden was beyond confused. If Midas knew that holding out his hands could allow him to copy his skills, then why would he do it? Was this a trap? Was it a test? He said he wants to be friends, what does that even mean? Aiden was now thinking about every angle as he always did in life. People were untrustworthy, and he figured he was better off on his own. He just could not figure this guy out right now. Who would willingly walk into flames, knowing that they would get burned? Aiden thought this far and figured, well, if he wants to give me his index viewing skill so badly, then I will gladly help him out. Aiden reached out his hands and grabbed Midas. They looked at each other and Aiden said, "I'm Aiden. It's nice to meet you too, my friend," while activating his skill. At this moment, Aiden was expecting that wonderful but frightening feeling again where he was inheriting information straight into his body. It was an exhilarating feeling. He waited and waited, and nothing. Aiden's eyes popped wide open. What? There was someone who could counter his skill? Midas merely smiled and asked, "Did it work? Or do you need more time?" "How are you doing this?" asked Aiden. Was this guy an S-ranker perhaps? He had never stolen from an S-ranker before because he had no idea where he could even find one. He was honestly still learning the conditions of his skill's activation and inactivation conditions. This was the first time in 3 attempts that it had failed. "I guess it didn't work, huh?" "Well, I didn't do much. I just figured it wouldn't work." Julio, having watched from the side this whole time, asked confusedly, "You guys, what are you talking about?" "Julio, meet our new friend. He's gonna hang out with us from now on. His name is Aiden," said Midas, but when he looked closer at Julio, he realized that Julio's stomach was slightly distended, probably due to Julio drinking way too much water. I look away for 1 second and this guy gets pregnant. "Oh, Aiden. Welcome to the best team," exclaimed Julio with his thumbs up. Aiden was still trying to figure out what was happening. Now he was friends with these 2 guys? When did he become friends with them? Midas handed his own water bottle to Aiden and said to him, "For now, drink. I'm sure you must be thirsty, right?" Aiden merely shook his head and grabbed the bottle. He downed the contents and breathed out a refreshed breath of air. This was some good water, although not as sweet as he had overheard Midas make it out to be. Midas continued speaking, saying, "I know you might be a bit flustered, but I'm sure if you think about it, you'll realize that hanging out with us would not be a bad deal for you. I can give you targets which you can use your skills on, and you can use those skills to help us out from time to time. Anyway, I'm oversimplifying it, but you get the gist, right? Let's all be friends. Midas, didn't you say something about some rocks for some knives or tools? Asked Julio, to which Midas said. Oh yeah. I totally forgot about that. I'll grab some nice rocks and then we'll go back to the south where we'll build a camp for ourselves. That's gonna be fun. Do you need help? Said Julio with some palpable excitement in his voice, and Midas replied promptly. It was almost as if what happened 5 to 10 minutes ago had never happened. Aiden watched all this and decided that it might not be a bad idea to hang out with these weirdos. At least for now. He'd use them for all they're worth until he made something of himself, and then he would throw them away when they became useless to him. Chapter 20, Revealing Deduction. So, Aiden. You are from where? Asked Julio, to which Aiden said. I'm from Turkey. Eh? Turkey? I like turkeys, they taste good. Pfft, turkeys really do taste good, don't they, Julio? Haha, said Midas jokingly. Aiden could only shake his head at these two. Haha, very funny. Where are you guys from? I'm from Brazil, while Midas is from South Africa. Eh, really? So Midas is South African. No wonder I couldn't tell what accent he had. Said Aiden in understanding. Like that they got to know each other while walking back towards the south. They had done all they needed to do and collected all they needed to collect, and they were finally on their way back to the stone tablet. Apparently, Aiden hadn't seen it yet, and Julio was hyping it up to be a marvel and a spectacle. At this time, which Midas estimated to be about 7 a.m. in the morning, there were more and more people walking north, and Midas and his group could occasionally hear conversations from them. Whoa, did you see the apple trees? We can finally get something to eat. I know, right? This challenge isn't gonna be that hard. Yeah, but aren't they 10 AC? 10 AC is pretty cheap if you think about it. Really? I think it's expensive since those trees won't be enough for all the people stuck in this first trial anyway. So what? We need to eat something. I would buy them even if they made them 50 AC. I know, I already saw some people who bought a lot of them in bulk. And then right after, the tree's fruit was regrown and even more apple trees were planted. I wish I had a skill like that. Midas shook his head at this. He understood that the panic was real, but there is always a way out of any situation. If they calmed down and figured things out, then maybe they wouldn't have to resort to the apple trees. Midas felt like it was too early to put his apples in the Gwenfrank group's basket. As far as he was concerned, he still had options. By the way, Aiden. Do you have other friends maybe? We're trying to build a group so that we can take care of each other. As you've already seen, this place is not safe at all, said Midas after thinking about it. The reason he said this much was in case Aiden actually had friends or people he hung out with that might be useful. If there were none, then that was okay too. He was just trying to project the image of someone magnanimous and driven. I slept in the northwest side of the shrine and there I met some guys, but we split up in the morning, so I wouldn't really call them my friends or anything, said Aiden with a wry smile. Haha, that's good too. Now that you meet us, we can be good friends from now on, said Julio with his thumbs up and a smack on Aiden's back. Aiden chuckled and shook his head. This guy was really easy to get along with. Unlike somebody else. He was now even more on guard against Midas. Especially since if he knew what skills he possessed, then he would have told Julio about it to make sure he doesn't fall for any tricks. But Midas merely watched on as Aiden used his skills on Julio. On their way through the forest a few minutes ago, Aiden was introducing himself, and seeing that Midas already knew that he had the gift of mimicry, he figured he might as well expose it partially. Aiden then went on to explain his skills and how he could use it to look like and learn other people's skills. Of course, he phrased it as if he needed their permission first. He then asked for Julio's permission to demonstrate it. After hearing this much, Julio expressly gave his permission and Aiden then held his hand. And after a few moments, his skin started visibly changing. His eye shape and color, his nose and ears and facial features all morphed and started resembling Julio's. Even his height and body shape ended up morphing into an uncanny resemblance of Julio's. When Julio saw that Aiden could turn into him, Julio was even more excited. Didn't this mean that there were two of him now? So cool. When he looked closer, he realized that Aiden's version of himself was a bit more handsome. Wait, why was he more handsome? Weren't they meant to be the same? Aiden then explained that he had somehow copied Julio's berserk skill and he could use it later in the future. He then thanked Julio for allowing him to demonstrate his skill and also promised to make it up to Julio in the future. Julio waved it all away, saying that now that they were teammates, they had to work hard to protect each other and he was glad that Aiden was now stronger. Midas was watching all of this happen from the side with flashes of understanding. This was incredibly fascinating. In the past 2 hours he had been exposed to all manner of what Earthlings may have termed to be impossible. People who could release lasers out of their hands. People who could construct seemingly impenetrable barriers in midair. People who could shapeshift into werewolves. People who could turn whole environments into icy cold scenes that resemble the Arctic. And now, he saw someone turn into someone else with a 99% likeness. If he were told that these things were possible he would have vehemently disagreed. And yet here he was, living in it. He felt an insatiable greed for the knowledge that governed these impossible happenings. He wanted to know it all. Now, they were talking about the trees that were all over the forest and how they were so useless and boring, and Midas decided to share what he knew. Actually, these trees might be dangerous, said Midas nonchalantly. Aiden perked up at this time and asked, "What do you mean?" "I'll tell you guys as long as you promise to keep it a secret," said Midas with a low volume to his voice as if he was afraid someone else might hear him. "Of course, you can trust us," said Julio. He knew that Midas had some insightful skills that could give him knowledge about his environment. It seems Midas has figured something out again. Aiden on the other hand just listened in while nodding as if to affirm what Julio was saying. Seeing them paying maximum attention, Midas continued, "I used my skill on them and figured out that they are constantly releasing a fragrance that is affecting us. The longer we stay in this place, probably, the more we will be affected." "Oh yeah, you did mention that this place isn't safe." "So it was because of that," said Julio absent-mindedly. Wait. "Are you serious?" said Aiden in shock. He looked around and sniffed around but realized he couldn't tell what fragrance to look for. After realizing that he had probably sniffed this fragrance in large quantities again, he tried to block his nose using his hand and the shirt on his body. Midas laughed and said, "What are you doing?" "You said there's a fragrance being spread by the trees, so I'm trying to filter it," said Aiden with a dumb look on his face. Wasn't this obvious? Unless this sneaky guy was joking around. "Wait, this isn't a joke, right?" asked Aiden, trying to make sure of things. He still kept his hand and t-shirt by his mouth and nose just to make sure though. Midas laughed even harder seeing this. "It's real. It's also too late. You've been breathing it in, this whole time. And you are probably still breathing it in. So you might as well stop doing that," said Midas, shaking his head. Julio giggled from the side thinking this Aiden was an interesting character. "Ah? Fucking shit. What does the fragrance do to us? Is it a sleeping drug? Does it make us go crazy?" said Aiden, now freaking out. Midas and Julio laughed even harder and Aiden wanted to punch them because of this. They just revealed that the trees were releasing a fragrance that was affecting people and now they were laughing about it? These guys. It's okay. I think that the fragrance is something that makes us extremely prone to emotional outbursts. So think of every emotional state you can have, and now amplify it. That's what is going to happen to us. I think the longer we breathe in the fragrance, the more our emotions will be amplified. Aiden's eyes almost popped out of his head, and even Julio was surprised. He knew that the trees were weird according to Midas' earlier words, but this was the first time he was hearing the in-depth explanation of what was happening. What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? Hey, Aiden, are you okay? Don't get too emotional, said Midas, trying to calm him down in a joking manner. Aiden panicked even more, thinking that the tree's fragrance was actually working on him now. Is this guy a hypochondriac? Thought Midas. He expected a conman and a fraudster to be more calm than this. Aiden then tried to make his face have a blank expression on it, as if he was unaffected about things anymore. Midas giggled to himself yet again. Why are all the chosen such weirdos? How sure are you of this, Midas? Asked Julio. Well, I'm 70% sure. I'm sure that the fragrance will affect our emotions, but whether or not it amplifies them or does anything more specific, that I'm not too sure about. Although, according to my deductions, it should be amplification. And it'll only get worse over time, said Midas, to which Julio nodded and continued speaking. Is there anything that might happen because of this emotions? If I'm right, then people will start going crazy. And it will happen soon. Very soon, said Midas. Aiden and Julio's faces changed again into some serious expressions. Midas continued speaking, saying, well, think about it. What are emotions? Emotions are nothing more than drives, punishments and rewards that the body sends to your mind to make sure that you are still in check. If you eat food and drink water, your body rewards you with positive emotions like happiness and satisfaction, as if to tell you to keep doing that. And in contrast, if you isolate yourself, or do anything that might be seen as bad for your survival, then the body punishes you by sending you negative emotional states like guilt and sadness. Those emotional states drive you to your next actions, causing you to react in a certain way. If you have amplified emotional states, then the body will need amplified homeostatic mechanisms. Homeostasis is the process by which the body tries to keep itself in an okay or balanced state. Not too happy, not too sad, not too bored, not too excited. You guys get it now, right? Get what? Asked Aiden. What would happen if the emotions you experience for certain things were blown out of proportion? You do the smallest thing, and you will immediately feel like the happiest person in the world, causing you to feel really good. Imagine when the body will try to regulate itself, so the down from any high will be brutal. Midas continued, making sure to fully enunciate every syllable. In a case like this, it would be like our emotions are a drug and we are drug addicts. Oh my God. Think about if someone experiences sadness. If that is amplified, they could even become irrational and hurt themselves, maybe even hurt other people too. Think about anger, frustration, guilt, greed, lust. Think about how many people would start hurting each other due to these drives and emotional states. Jesus, said Julio, now understanding the severity of the situation. Midas, after thinking some more, continued. Julio, back then, was that something you would do? Would you just start a fight with people after they talk shit? No. Not really actually, said Julio with some shock in his tone. Yeah. I thought so. Even I found myself getting angry at those guys after they called us names. And I never get angry. Like never. This might be scary to think about, but we might be getting affected already. Midas calmly delivered this piece of news, causing the two men to be shocked beyond words. Even he found this a bit annoying, and he would have to regulate himself thoroughly from now on. Aiden, on the other hand, was terrified. He knew that his mental state had never been so stable. He started worrying about all the things that might happen to him from now on. Whether it was through his own irrational actions or the irrational actions of others. Julio was a bit more calm, but he was still nervous. That anger that overtook him back there could come back in the future, and it could be even more terrifying. He didn't want anything bad to happen to himself or the people he cared about. Man, fuck all this shit. Who cares? As long as someone doesn't mess with us, then I'm good, said Julio, to which Midas smiled. Aiden, however, sported a frown that dug deeper and deeper wrinkles on his face. What the fuck are these trials? Why are we here? Why us? Asked Aiden while laughing self-mockingly. They had just been sent in here one day out of nowhere. They had been abducted, some of them had been killed by getting their heads exploded, and now they were going to slowly but surely become crazy the longer they stayed in this first trial? And worse still, this was only the first trail. There were 6 more to go. 6. What Julio said was really on point. Fuck all this shit. If Aiden ever found whoever put them here, he would make sure to liquidate all their assets and belongings and empty all their bank accounts. Midas thought for a moment, before continuing skeptically. Actually, I think that's why this trial is called the trial of self. The amplified emotional states will reveal the best and worst sides of people. It will reveal their irrationality, their egos, and their true selves. Anyways, this is just my theory after being here for 16 hours now, so it might be wrong, but still. Take care of your emotional states, guys. A heavy atmosphere took over, and for some time, none of the men spoke. If what Midas said was true, this really was a dangerous situation.